Okay. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Today is a rather more serious discussion and a topic. Last week, has it really been a whole week at this point? I think it has. Last week, President Zelensky met with President Trump and Vice President Vance in the Oval Office to discuss the signing of a mineral deal. What happened next was chaos. Blame got thrown around. People took up sides on the internet. Zelensky was removed from the White House. He was kicked out. Since then, the U.S. has paused all aid to Ukraine and has cut off intelligence sharing to Ukrainian forces as well. We're going to talk about all of that tonight. The question for tonight is, what should America's involvement or further involvement in Ukraine be? Was President Trump, did he do correct in kicking Zelensky out? Was Zelensky being disrespectful? Is he right to shut off aid? Or should we double down and further support our allies in Ukraine and help them to win the war? We've got some great guests to talk about it tonight. I'm going to give them brief opening statements on this, and I stress it's concise. We have one more coming. When Andrew gets here, I'll pull him in. But for now, let's start. Well, give us your thoughts first, Ukrainian Anna. Tell people who you are and tell people what you think of the situation. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My name is Anastasia. I'm a volunteer from Kharkiv. I do some type of talks every now and then with people about the things. And I'm just pretty much just a regular Ukrainian person with a job as a translator and being a volunteer for the United Ukrainian Armed Forces as well. As far as my opinions go, opinions are shared, I'd say, amongst most European people that it was a complete and utter fucking disgrace. And expected, because anyone who had some sort of followed what Trump's campaign about this issue has been, like myself, expected him to pressure us essentially to surrender on the terms of Russia. And if we refuse, he would then blackmail us and pressure us with the restriction of aid. I didn't expect extortion, though. That was kind of, spicy on his part, but other than that, it kind of went down exactly how I expected it to be. And now we are at the situation that one guarantor of our security back at the Budapest Memorandum days is invading us and trying to destroy our nation, and the other one is now abandoned us or maybe even is assisting Russia. At the very least, seems to be more of an ally to Russia than it is to us. As far as the fallout out of this goes, nothing we can do, really. It's up to the United States at the end of the day to decide whether they want to aid us or not. It's up to them whether they want to uphold their insurances or their standing in the world as the leader of the West, right? Like I said, not much we can do about it. Our goal is clear. We want security guarantees. We don't want to be backstabbed and fucked over like we used to be. Not only Ukraine, by the way, a lot of Eastern European countries relate to that. And we only hope that Europe, it's the last wake-up call, okay? They had bajillion wake-up calls, and maybe that's the last one, and they will finally see that we are the defenders of Europe, and they will invest in that appropriately, which, frankly, they should, because it's, we are on the same continent, and it's them primarily that we are defending. So us first, obviously, them second. So yeah, that's my take pretty much. I only hope that Europe, gets its shit together. Other than that, I just want United States to at least not assist Russia. Okay,
Okay.
at least give us there something. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for your perspective, and we will get into it as we go throughout this debate. Non-smoker, you're up.
Hey everyone, twitch.tv/non_smoker. Yeah, so it's kind of awkward being on the same side as Trump. I don't like Trump. I didn't vote for Trump. I don't support Trump. And to be honest, the way that Trump and Vance conducted themselves at the press conference, I thought was embarrassing. It's, a really ugly display of like their lack of diplomatic skill. The whole thing was really uncomfortable. But all that being said, I mean, I've been consistent every time I talk about this conflict since the start. I've always argued that this is really nothing more for the U.S. anyway than a proxy war with Russia. And I always sort of felt like it was a fool's errand because it really depended on, the expectation was, let's deplete Russia's military capacity as much as we can. And then when it's advantageous for us, we're just going to pull out of this conflict and whatever happens to Ukraine happens. I always thought that it would be better for Ukraine to reach a settlement with Russia early in the conflict, which they tried to do until Boris Johnson urged them not to. With that, we've basically given them offloaded older weapons, subsidized weapons manufacturers to make new weapons, and the only thing we really have to show for our end of things in terms of like achieving our war aims is like lots of dead Russians, and that's really it. Right? Russia continues to churn along pretty smoothly as a war machine. They've probably done more to deplete our military capacity at this point than we have theirs. I think the whole thing is a real tragedy. I don't feel good about the fact that this is happening to Ukraine, but I do feel kind of vindicated in the fact that I said all along that this was going to happen. We do this consistently and constantly. We create proxies and develop them, and then we fucking rug pull them when it's advantageous for us to do so. So, that's basically my whole argument here.
Well, we will get into it as we go. Dylan, tell people who you are and what your thoughts are. Go ahead.
Sure. My name's Dylan. I'm one of Zelensky's thugs. So I think the meeting itself is just classic Trump. This is how he's behaved ever since he was on The Apprentice. So there's nothing about Trump's behavior during that meeting that specifically surprised me around him, or the fact that J.D. Vance was dancing like a monkey to brown nose for him, in front of him, try to get on his good side, tag team Zelensky, or that for somehow Russian state TV got in the room, or that the types of questions he's being asked is like, why aren't you wearing a suit, Zelensky, when we're trying to take this war seriously, supposedly. Not to mention, like, just the thing that gets me about Zelensky being disrespectful is the area of disrespect is the fact that Zelensky asked a pretty legitimate question of, the Russians have violated these security arrangements so many times when we made them, Minsk 1, Minsk 2. How do we make it so it doesn't happen again? And the reaction was, why aren't you saying thank you? The reason they're reacting that way is because they don't have an answer. There's a giant gaping hole in Trump's peace plan that stops it from being a peace plan outside of a temporary ceasefire. And until that's settled, then it's not a peace plan. Then it's just something to make him feel good. And so when I see them react that way to a very basic question that anybody who's trying to find a long-term solution to this would have to answer, like, how do you stop the Russians from invading again? His only response is, me and Putin, we have like a close relationship. We're close, we're friendly. He knows me and I know him. He respects me. But let's say for a moment that was true. Let's say for a moment that somehow that we were all naive enough to believe that their personal friendship is somehow more important than the geopolitical forces that dictate statecraft. What happens when Trump isn't president anymore in 4 years, and it's been 5 years? What then, when somebody else gets elected? You need to make arrangements that can stand the test of time past one administration. It's the same problem where if you exit every treaty, once you go from one administration to the next, nobody's going to think you're credible, right? And Trump is the king of crushing American credibility. As for what the United States should do at this point, I mean, I think that. Well, I mean, I don't know how much we're going to talk about like military logistics in this conversation. Nobody in this room is a military expert, so I'm not going to take anybody's in this room's like commentary seriously about like depleting military resources, and because nobody in here knows. But I mean, if we're going to have that conversation, since it was brought up just briefly, the Russians have lost 50 to 60% of their tank arsenal. I see them using tanks from the Stalin era to charge frontline positions. Their infantry are now doing motorcycle assaults, Coast Guard assaults with Chinese golf carts. Like, these are not things a modern nation state does with its armed forces. If its military is being run efficiently, they have enough supplies, and they're not under immense pressure. And we hear complaints from Russian soldiers and Russian divisions across the front about manpower shortages, as they have yet to make difficult political decisions around mobilization that Putin knows could threaten his regime. So I think that my problem isn't that, oh my God, we're talking to the Russians. My problem isn't that, oh my God, we could be aiming towards a peace deal. My problem is we have cards, we choose not to use them, give up everything in negotiations, and undercut the Ukrainians. If we really want to end the war and we care about the suffering of civilians, we wouldn't be, say, ending intelligence sharing to show the missiles hitting children's hospitals, or trying to deport 240,000 Ukrainian refugees back to a war zone. We would be trying to make it so the Russians are compelled to come to the negotiating table instead of compelling the Ukrainians to set them up for failure later. Also, the Boris Johnson peace deal thing is all just bullshit. It's been debunked bullshit for over 2 years. If you haven't learned that yet, then you're never going to learn it.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and appreciate your thoughts. I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. Last but certainly not least, Lactoid.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I voted for Trump in 2014 for the first time ever was because he was the only one talking about making serious proposals to end this war. You've heard the Democrats say on the opposition that they're willing to fund this as long as it takes. They aren't being as reasonable as Trump is when it comes to identifying the reality on the battlefield and the reality of the US economy. Here we have a conflict with likely over 1 million killed or wounded, hundreds of thousands dead, and it needs to end. Neither Russia nor Ukraine, as state actors, are necessarily the undisputed good guys in this conflict. Sure, there are critiques you can levy at Russia, but there are also critiques you can levy at Ukraine that we in the West just tend to ignore. This is not some David versus Goliath. This is two problematic governments throwing young men to their deaths, and it needs to stop. Trump's negotiation will save us money and, more importantly, human lives. I think pausing aid until a peace negotiation date is planned, which is what the proposal is, makes perfect sense in order to get Ukraine to get real in terms of actually resolving this conflict.
Okay. Well, with that, Andrew isn't here yet. I hope he's okay. So let's just go to the open section of the discussion. Lots been said. I guess the first question I have for the pro-Ukrainian side here, so Dylan and Anna, at what point does Ukraine need to come to the table?
When there's terms that are just enough to come to the table. I mean, when the terms could dictate a lasting peace. You don't come to the table if the terms are start the war again in 5 years. Then you're just saying, I don't want to fight. I want my kids to fight.
I could provide a little bit of a longer answer. We can come right now, honestly, but only if there was something to come to. We can surrender on our own without giving, I don't know, half our rare earth minerals to United States. Like, we can just surrender right now. That's the terms. Putin's terms are essentially recognize all the occupied territories. It is no NATO for Ukraine, no security guarantees, reduction of our army, reduction of our arms, and change of government, blah, 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 right? So all of that Trump wants to give him no concessions from Russia, all concessions from our side, and we can just go to Kremlin and do the exact same thing without United States negotiating anything. So in our sense, it just doesn't make any fucking sense to negotiate anything with this administration, because they're not, despite being like the guarantors, quote unquote, of our security, as it should be Russia, UK and United States. It's really, I mean, they are assuring our surrender, I guess. But I mean, we don't need that. And what we do need is not to be fucked over again. So that's why our president tried to basically present at the Oval Office, that Ukrainians are not going to be satisfied with just assurances, because assurances from United States mean shit. They don't mean anything. That you can wipe your ass with them, just like you can wipe your ass with any Russian ceasefire or negotiation. So yeah, that's basically our whole deal. It's not about not negotiating. Most people in Ukraine support negotiations. They don't support surrender. They don't support negotiations without Ukraine, between the United States and Russia. And they most certainly do not support ceding everything to Russia. So yeah, that's my take, I suppose.
Any response from the other side?
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I find it always confusing when we enter these debates, because there seems to be this, like, I don't know, double speak kind of going on, or maybe I'm misunderstanding. It's like, well, we really rely on U.S. aid. It's crucial for us in fighting this war, but, you know, we also don't really need it. We can fight for ourselves. And it's like, honestly, I believe Ukraine, you know, as a country with sovereignty, has every right to defend itself. I don't think they should be forced to surrender or forced to unfair terms either. But I think the U.S., you know, as Anna said, I mean, is totally within its right to withdraw aid, military aid to Ukraine if we deem it too expensive and a waste of money, which is exactly what's happening right now. It's been, you know, I mean, I know the numbers are always disputed, but it's at least nearly $200 billion in military aid. Those are the numbers that I'm working with anyway. And it doesn't appear that in the last 2 years, at least, there's been any significant territorial movements, at least not in the positive for Ukraine. Looks like lots of people dying and suffering in a war that ultimately, you know, if it's not a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, then when the U.S. pulls out, the war can settle itself on its own. Ukraine can, you know, battle off the Russians, and they can settle that, you know, on their own terms. But yeah, I don't really get that. And I do kind of want to push back on a couple of things Dylan said. I mean, you know, while I admit I'm not a military expert, neither are you. And in addition to that, I'm just basing this off of data that I've read, that NATO and NATO generals have basically acknowledged the fact that Russia is outpacing NATO and the US together in terms of military production, in terms of the total number of items produced that can be accounted for. And in addition to that, I don't think that the negotiations with Boris Johnson, or being wrecked by Boris Johnson, is some fucking made up absurd conspiracy theory. I'd love to hear your argument.
But I mean, you can continue to believe.
What's your argument? So what's your argument?
I think I've told you this before. I don't know if you just forgot. But
maybe I forgot. Let's hear it again.
Okay. Well, first, let's talk about the military. You're right. I'm not a general. You're not a general. I'm just saying that nobody should take anybody, including me, too seriously when it comes to we're going to take the army and we'll march that way and that'll lead to this victory, or they have this much depletion. But what I can say is that we do know that Russia has lost the majority of their tank fleet. We do know that they can't really replenish the losses that they are taking. And we do know that roughly 40 to 50% of their artillery shells come from North Korea. And if 50% of your artillery shells is coming from a slave state that has to run its factories 24/7, 7 days a week, then it's going to be kind of difficult to say I can compete against the West entirely on my own when it comes to production, and we can fight the entirety of this 1 billion strong alliance with our production alone. I'm calling bullshit on that, because if that was the case, they would have already won the war. And they haven't won the war, which indicates that the official statistics, maybe that you're reading from the Russians or whatever statistic you're putting out that are saying that, oh no, they're actually able to build up their fleet and they're more powerful than the West now. The West is actually weaker. The Russians are more powerful now. I mean, you can believe that, but they've lost the majority of their tank fleet, the majority of their armor. Most of their artillery is coming from the North Koreans. They have to be reinforced by North Korean troops. They've fired the majority of, I mean, holy fuck, dude. Where do you want to start? But so putting that aside, we can move on to, you want to go there? Or
well, yeah, no, I think it's important. No, I think it's important. And we could get to the Boris Johnson thing too, but just so we're clear, the source here is Le Monde, and they're quoting Christopher Cavoli, who's the commander of U.S. European Command.
And he is saying that they are able to regenerate.
Hold on. What he's saying is Russia is on track to produce or refurbish over 1,200 new main battle tanks a year, and to manufacture at least 3 million artillery shells or rockets per year.
Listen to that.
Over triple the amount the U.S. estimated at the beginning of the war.
What does refurbish mean?
I know it means repairing, but it says produce or refurbish.
80 to 90% of that is refurbishment.
Wait. Where's your source?
Hold on. one at a time.
Where's your
clueless.
source on
You're
that?
so
You-
fucking clueless.
Okay.
The
Where's
majority
your
of these-
source on that?
Where's the
Where's your source
Hold
on
on.
that?
Let Dylan tell us.
Everybody-
So there's no
Give-
source on
hey,
it.
not
This isn't
smokers,
an
not
op- you
smokers.
didn't let me
Give Dylan a
finish,
chance to
non-smoker.
tell
yeah,
us.
there's
his
no
source.
source on that.
Christ. Wait, can you get people who are like a little bit more knowledgeable on that
So
side next time?
triggered.
Make it a
Holy
little bit
shit!
more
What
of
a
a challenge.
fucking pussy! You don't have
Can you
any
make him
fucking
shut up?
Okay,
source.
okay. I want to hear
He
what
doesn't know what
Dylan
he's
has to
talking
say
about,
real
or-
quick. I'll let you go
Okay.
after that. I
The
promise
majority
you,
of the
non-smoker.
tanks that are being refurbished, okay, are coming from old Soviet stockpiles. These are not new tanks being built, which means that there's a limit. You can't endlessly pull from Soviet stockpiles because the Soviet Union's dead and they're not producing tanks anymore. And that's why when I talk about them using Stalin-era tanks on the front line, the reason they're doing that isn't because, oh my God, we're producing so many tanks and we're so... The reason they're doing that is they have to go further and further and further back into the reserves to keep up the inhuman type of offensives that they're carrying out all across the front line. Which means that saying that, oh my gosh, look, they're producing 1,200. What matters is how much of that is new battle tanks. Because if they're taking old T-54s out of storage instead of producing new T-90s, if Stalin saw that tank, okay, that's not impressive to me.
Yeah, just so we're clear, you don't have a source on it being 90% refurbished things,
I said it's 70 to 80% refurbishment.
but you don't
Do you
have
want
a
to find?
source
Do you want
on
me to
that.
find
Just so
any
we're clear.
source on the?
I would
can
love
tell you
that.
the majority, 70 to 80%. I can tell you.
You just
is-
just find me a source. That's all I
Well,
need.
number one, you can use Perun. He's an open source researcher, has found this data before, but there's others as well. I'm pretty sure even Western sources, I'm pretty sure pretty much like Russian sources acknowledge this. I mean, it's easier to take an old tank and update it and put it out than to produce brand new T-90s. Just look at the casualties on the front line. 10 to maybe 5% of them are T-90 tanks. The majority of them are going to be older tanks that they've taken out of storage. This isn't like a debatable point. This is like well known. You can see it from the casualties on the front. When I go to the front line, all the tanks I see are old Soviet gear. I've seen only one T-80 in the entirety of my time on Ukraine, destroyed or in service. Right? They are using mostly old shit. So saying, oh, look, they're refurbishing all this old stuff. Okay, if you have 10,000 old cars and you're refurbishing all these old cars and 80 or 60 or any majority of that is going to be old cars, you're going to run out. You're going to run out of these old cars.
Yeah, so just so we're clear, even if you're correct on the tanks, you're not factoring in artillery.
Non-smoker.
And
Yeah,
it's-
50% of it coming
on,
from
just real
North
quick.
Korea.
Just real quick. Hey,
Move on
gang,
from
listen. Just real quick. I just did the order of operations here. So, non-smoker, I'll let you respond. You respond to that.
I got a
and then-
response as well.
Yeah. Then Anna wants in, and then
I never got to
Lactoid,
talk
and
about
then we'll
Boris. He
introduce
said I
Andrew.
lied about the Boris thing, and I had to like
We'll
discuss
get- we'll
that.
get
I
to
can
it.
address more things, but
Okay.
you were there.
Finish your response,
Yeah.
non-smoker, and then we're
Just
going
so
to go
we're
to Anna,
clear.
Lactoid, Andrew.
Yeah, just so we're clear, even if I accept what you're saying, everything you're saying at face value, which I have no reason to, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt here, okay? It's 90% refurbished Soviet tanks that are falling apart as they're being operated, and 50% of these shells are North Korean made in slave labor, and it's this horrible thing. It's still more than the US and all NATO allies combined, and
That
it's
is true.
three times what they thought the Russians would be able to produce per year at the start of the conflict. And my only argument here is that Russian military production, whether it's supplemented by North Korea and old Soviet hardware or not, is still far greater than what we projected it to be, one, and it's not slowing down. So the assumption that we're just depleting Russia's military capacity, which was the goal of this war, at least in part, if you listen to Mitch McConnell, if you listen to Lindsey Graham, if you listen to all of these people in our government who argue as to why we need to support Ukraine, a big part of it is depleting Russia's military capacity. It's not fucking working.
But it's happened. You can't say that and then see the tanks that they're putting out there. If it's true that they're refurbishing a lot more tanks than we thought they would, but the quicker burning through of their stockpile is not something to brag about. If they're losing tanks at a
Dylan,
much faster rate, that they have to keep
It's
refurbishing
not
them.
the way
They're
of
Dylan,
burning
if
through
they
it
were
much
burning through their
quicker than we
stockpile,
thought.
why would the number of tanks refurbished or produced
Because
not
they have
change?
to refurbish more because they keep blowing up. What do you mean?
Okay, let's
Okay,
give
look,
it to Anna real quick.
Okay, this is the last thing I'll
Jesus
say because wait. Come on, let me just say about the Boris Johnson thing. Okay, just
Okay.
quick. I have to. If he says I lied or he asked me to talk, I'm not
Okay,
gonna.
yeah.
I never
I'm
said
gonna
you lied.
respond it.
Quickly.
Okay, but you said that I wasn't right about that, or that you
I
needed me to
disagree with you,
explain
yeah.
myself. Okay,
I never
fine,
called you a
Anna can
liar,
talk,
I
I'll talk
disagree.
about it. Anna can talk. I'll talk about it
Okay,
later.
Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll talk about Boris Johnson thing is like a beaten horse at this point. Boris Johnson was the most popular guy in Ukraine, by the way, because he came to support us. He said that he really doesn't think that you can negotiate with Putin. That's it. That's all he said. There's like literally nothing else. The Ukrainian decision to stop the negotiations, however, came about 2 weeks prior because of the Bucha, or what we discovered, the massacre in Bucha. And that pretty much almost entirely destroyed amongst the population the desire to have any negotiations. And it reflected, obviously, upon the government as well. And for example, Naftali Bennett, or whatever the fuck that guy's name is, from Israel, he also came here and said, like, yeah, I don't think like the Ukrainians can negotiate with Putin at this point. So, it's a retarded point. It has been.
But no, it's not. Actually, you're totally disputing Naftali Bennett's own words.
Finish, then you can respond to her, I promise.
That's one thing. I addressed it a bajillion times. I don't care. What I do care about is the good point you brought up. The good point you brought up is the double speak you said. Like what's if you say like you don't need, and we never said we don't need United States. United States, 65 million in particular of military aid helped us a lot. It's really, especially with the anti-air. So for example, all of our batteries. I'm talking to you, Nonsmoker, by the way. All of our batteries have been basically United States, right? So all of our like Patriot systems, which we have like 3, so it doesn't really like matter in that great scheme of things. But HIMARS helped insanely. It helped a lot on the front. A lot of that was United States. Intelligence of United States helped tremendously to prevent massive strikes, to know where they are. All of that helped tremendously. But it doesn't mean that if United States stops that, the war will stop and we will stop, because like you said, we're not a proxy war. If we were, we would stop, but we're not. So because of that, we are losing our sponsor, and we're losing our supposed security guarantor by the Budapest Memorandum situation. But we'll just have a lot more casualties. We'll have a lot more death. We will have a lot more hardship. Probably we'll lose more territory. That's all of that's true. But so it's not a double speak. It is both things. On one end, they were incredibly helpful to us, United States, but at the same time, without them doesn't mean the war effort stops. And I don't see the problem you pointed out, to be honest.
Okay, I want to give brief response to that, Nonsmoker, then I want to go to Lactoid, because Lactoid's been waiting a while.
Yeah, I'll keep it really focused, but you're contradicting Naftali Bennett's own words. Naftali Bennett said that the ceasefire seemed possible before Western powers intervened. He said that in like a 5-hour interview on his YouTube channel, or on a YouTube channel somewhere.
Yes, but he then added that
Ukrainska Pravda disputes what you're saying. Or sorry, Ukrainska Pravda. I know I'm pronouncing that terribly.
I've heard that source before. Yeah. You don't know your own source, buddy. But
it
so,
doesn't.
I don't understand the issue with the source. Explain it to me.
The Ukrainska Pravda. Okay, also, let's skip the whole source. Let's go straight to the point. The agreement's public, right? You know the agreement's public. The agreement they debated.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I'm aware.
Okay, so let's skip all of the nonsense and just get straight to the point. What do you think a Ukrainian leader might have a problem with an agreement that says that the army that they're allowed to have has to be like 1/4 the size of the army they currently have, which beat off the Russian invasion at the start of the war after Russia invaded them while saying they wouldn't, twice in the last decade. It seems like the type of thing you would do if you didn't want your country to exist, or if you wanted peace in your country to mean being peace of another country.
Any chance of that also fell apart after Bucha discovery, which, by the way, Naftali Bennett says, next sentence after what you said, he says that if there was any possibility of the negotiations, it completely fell off after the liberation of Kiev region upwards, right, in the north. So you're just skipping the next sentence, basically, is what you're doing.
Just as to answer Dylan's question
real quick,
or statement,
but we do have to get Lactoid in.
I'll shut up. I'll promise. So. I would have just went with any agreement that would lead to less Ukrainians dying. That would just be my approach, though. I don't know.
Lactoid,
wow. So cool.
Lactoid,
so brave.
Oh boy, that's what I got. Okay,
I got a couple things here. So first of all, Dylan, with all respect, I think there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on. You start off by saying that we're not experts on this, and so we're not really somebody that you should listen to. And then you admit that you're also not an expert, but then go into very specifics about tank losses, about very specific weapons.
Because I still know more than you guys.
Well, there's just a lot of evidence out there that there's a lot of problems the Ukrainian military is facing, especially when it comes to manpower issues from the IISS, and also our administration and intel is indicating that there's a massive manpower issue in Ukraine. There's a reason why they're having to pull up in vans and grab people off the street to ship them to the front line, because they're having difficulty getting enough people to actually go and want to die at the front lines. and that's not even mentioning the territory losses that Ukraine has been experiencing. Those have been ramping up over the past year. They were especially bad at the end of last year, but you're seeing them again during this first quarter as well. I think there's also a little bit of a have your cake and eat it too that's happening here, where Russia's getting wrecked. They're just getting destroyed. They're incompetent. They can't handle warfare, but also they are this incredible threat to NATO, and they're going to invade NATO and destroy all of NATO. And they pose this incredible threat to NATO. And the way we can prevent that is by having Ukraine join NATO, because Russia will never touch a NATO country. Well, will they never touch a NATO country, or will they destroy all of NATO with their incredibly powerful military or their incredibly weak military that always loses and is entirely incompetent? The Zelensky peace plan, unless it's been updated as of today, is completely unfeasible. I mean, you have demands for Crimea back. You have demands for reparations, a complete withdrawal of all military assets in Ukraine. It's completely unworkable. And that's not even factoring in that Zelensky in 2022 signed a declaration indicating that he's not even allowed to negotiate with Putin. That definitely slows down the peace negotiations. And I think that's part of the reason here why, you have somebody with this crazy peace plan being proposed, and they're a complete refusal to negotiate with the head of state of the other side. You have to get them to get real. When it comes to this kind of negotiation. Otherwise, they're not. Otherwise, they're just going to believe that they're going to rely on the U.S. to fund them into eternity and throw as many bodies into the meat grinder as they want to.
Okay. So that was directed
towards me. You can respond. Once you respond, we're going to toss it to Andrew so he can get in.
Got you. I'll just go through what he said. I won't even go because there's some stuff earlier he said I want to respond to, but I'll just get through this. First, the draft. It's true. During World War II, 62% of the boys that we sent over there, we took off the street, drafted, and sent over there. In wars like this, the draft is a sad, sad part of war. The Russians have also mobilized people into the armed forces, and they're facing a massive manpower shortage as well. Now, they could mobilize more people, but Putin has not, because the only time his approval rating has really taken a strong hit was when he did the first wave of mobilization, and that's due to Russian numbers, not Western numbers, Russian numbers, which is why he hasn't done it, even though it would help his war effort. And so when we say, Ukraine has a manpower issue, yes, so does Russia. The fact that they're putting like $25,000, $30,000, crazy payments, first-time down payments for new recruits, that indicates to me that they're spending more and more and more because it's getting harder and harder to convince people to duck and take cover when the drones come for you, because it's a scary fucking war. So it is true that Ukraine has a manpower issue. So does Russia, because even the Russians know your money means nothing if you're dead. So yes, we should acknowledge the manpower issue, but this is my whole point when it comes to negotiating. We negotiate under the understanding that Russia also has a manpower issue. They're having troubles getting people to go agree. Did you know at the end of 2024, the average age for a new Russian volunteer was 50 years old? 50 years old. That's fucking insane. And we're not going to pretend that shows some level of weakness that we could take advantage of at the negotiating table, certainly before we give everything up in advance. In this other idea of the hypocrisy of Russia's so pathetic, but Russia's so powerful. Let me give you a historical example. Okay, let me be a bit of a historian. Finland. We'll all, I think, acknowledge in here that the first Soviet invasion of Finland was probably not the most well-managed military invasion in human history, right? Came with a lot of errors, a lot of problems with strategic planning, a lot of overconfidence, and they underestimated the Finns, and that led to a disastrous outcome. Later, though, through trial and error, due to the fact that they have many more lives to play with, and so they can kind of go through trial and error a lot more, and a bunch of other factors, they continue to work at it, and eventually they were able to still get some dominance over the Finns while the Finns retained their independence even after that fucked up invasion, because they went through trial and error, and learned and got better. And so my point is, if somebody's fucked up at the start of the war, you don't give them 3 to 4 to 5 years to recover, figure out what they're doing, and then be better at it. And we see that the Russians are engaging in sabotage attacks across Europe. They're trying to blow up railways in Poland using refugees. They're trying to do arson attacks in Canada. They're blowing up manufacturing facilities in the Czech Republic. They're engaged in industrial sabotage and the infiltration of European elections. Aggression against Europe isn't just seen through military aggression, it's also seen through the dividing of the internals of the state, like how the Russians tried to support the Black Lives Matter movement and the Blue Lives Matter movement at the same time in America. So yeah, the Russians right now aren't the biggest military threat in the world compared to, I don't know, fucking the most powerful army on the planet, but they're getting better. Every day they continue to improve, and they'll continue to improve, and it's not like their ambitions have changed. Do we really think if we give the Russians 5 to 6 years to figure out how they fucked up and get better, that they're just going to use it to rest on their laurels and stay the same and be lazy? I don't view the Russians as lazy. I view them as people who work very hard to conquer others.
I think there's a problem already, though, with what you said, because if the idea is they've gotten better at it, right, over and over again, they've gotten better at it to the point where they pose some threat to NATO countries, then what is Ukraine at this point, now that the Russians are so good at it, what is Ukraine joining NATO get us?
Better.
What is, sorry, I didn't hear the question.
If Russia is a threat to NATO countries, this idea that people have that as soon as they're done with Ukraine, they're going to take all of Ukraine, which is not going to happen. They're going to take all of Ukraine, and then they're going to start pushing into NATO countries. And the reason why they're able to push into NATO countries,
they're going to take.
I've been talking to people. They're saying Poland. They're saying they're coming into France. I mean, there's all sorts of.
In the future, but not now. Not now.
Yeah, but you don't have to do it physically.
Moldova's never going to happen.
They don't even have to do it militarily.
Moldova's the last country. Moldova's the last country before you hit NATO.
We are biggest army in Europe right now. That's why you need us in NATO. We also are the biggest drone operators in the world right now, with Russia as well. Unfortunately, they also have drones, but we are not joining NATO, not Europe anytime soon. Russia, I suppose. So we have the insane amount of experience that we are now, by the way, sharing with NATO people within the bases. And we're teaching people as well how to operate drones, how to navigate drone warfare, because this is the war of drones and artillery. By the way, it's not the war of tanks. So when it comes to this, we have a lot to offer to actual NATO and Europe as well.
With all due respect, this isn't really addressing what I was saying, though. What I'm saying is, if Russia is
why do we need you in NATO? Why you said why you need Ukraine in NATO? That's why.
No. I said what I'm saying. I'm not talking about like whether or not Ukraine has a military that can function. Of course, it does, right? What I'm saying is that there is this perception of Russia where not only are we you guys talking about how incompetent they are and how many losses they've had and how they're on the brink of defeat. When all the empirics appear to indicate
they're also going to conquer Europe.
Hold on. When all the empirics appear to indicate otherwise.
This isn't
but then
new.
you simultaneously have this powerhouse that's like as soon as they're done with Ukraine, they're so good at warfare now that they're going to be able to invade NATO. My question for you is if they're good enough. Hold on, if they're good enough to invade NATO at this point because they're so practiced and so good at warfare.
Right now, but
not right now.
Well, hold on. Let him finish his question, then Anna can respond. Then we're gonna get Andrew in. I promise. I promise. We gotta get Andrew in.
I'm here. I'm gonna go smoke a joint, Wick.
Whether it be right now, whether it be in a month, or whenever you think that hopefully this war will end soon. I don't know how long you guys want it to go for, but when there's like a contradiction here of there's this pathetic military power that also poses a threat to NATO to the point where it's going to invade NATO, which is why we need Ukraine to join NATO because that's the way you stop them from invading. Well, so either they're military, like they're so good at fighting now, like they got with the Finnish, that they're able to defeat NATO, in which case Ukraine joining NATO doesn't do anything for them since they have these plans anyway.
I got what you're saying. Let me explain. So first of all, they aren't extraordinary well at the fighting, as you can see. They cannot really, move to get their aims. But they're also severely underprepared and very faulty at the beginning of the invasion. Kind of similar thing that happened with Chechnya. I don't know how much you know about that conflict, but first Chechen war, they basically lost. They lost insane amount of equipment, insane amount of people. They couldn't accomplish any of their aims. So what they did is that they got a ceasefire deal, a peace, as Russians do. And in 4-year time, they attacked again, much better prepared, knowing the strong points and the weak points of their enemy, and they succeeded second time. So this is what we are trying to avoid as much as we can in Ukraine. Which about the NATO thing is that if you listen to Russian people, for example, to Russian officials, what they say, they will tell you. They say that what they need from Ukraine is human resource. What they need from Ukraine is resource to mobilize, because most of the common Russian practices is to not mobilize people from Moscow, from St. Petersburg, but mobilize people from the poor, like marginalized parts of the country, like Asia parts. People that regular Russians really don't care about dying. So that's kind of what they do. They want to use us as a resource, which much like Germans, for example, used Slovaks when they occupied Czechoslovakia to then invade Poland. And this is like a very common strategy. We have a lot of people. We're a big country, not compared to you, but compared to many other European countries in terms of the population. We have massive amounts of weapons now. We also have massive amount of experience as well. So yeah, they are mobilized. Most people from Donbass, like I recently just talked with my very close friend from Donbass, soldier who's at the front currently, and he said like there's like no man in Donbass at this point, because most of them Russia mobilizes and throws at us, right? So this is just a thing they do strategically. They also can use Moldova, they can use Armenia, Belarus, countries that are not currently in NATO, Georgia, countries that they already have precedents of invading and annexing territories. And after that, with all of that, they have a much, much, much better strategic positioning to attack, let's say, Baltic.
Okay, just real quick, just
I would like to respond to this.
I understand,
That's it,
but
pretty
real
much.
quick for housekeeping.
Yeah.
I will get to super chats at the top of the hour.
Andrew
So keep
probably
giving
wants
me
to
money.
say something.
Yeah, and Andrew does want to say something. So
I would like to respond to that though, real quick.
Is it?
I think there's again another problem here when we're playing up all the men and like manpower issues and material loss that Russia is experiencing, and then also insinuating that they have this goal where they're going to use the occupied territories like Crimea and
It's not
the
insinuation,
Donbass,
say it.
and then use them in order to be able to conquer NATO. I think it's ridiculous. I think that Russia, even if they had all of Ukraine, which they're not going to get, but even if they had all of Ukraine, aren't going to touch NATO. There's very specific reasons why they're not going to touch NATO. The reason why this rhetoric is being played up is because it's trying to secure Western funding for Ukraine, right? And one of the ways you can get Western people, like one of the ways you can get Westerners to like fork over money is if you make them feel afraid. Next, the Russians are coming for you. But the reality is they're not. They're not going to be going for any NATO country. It's ridiculous.
Except for the bombing, and the arson attacks, and the railroads they're blowing up, and the assassinations, and the attempts to manipulate our democracies and buying a politician.
Yeah.
Except for all that, they're not doing anything.
Andrew, welcome
We're
to the
talking
show.
invasions.
They do that
Andrew.
stuff because they're not going to engage us in a war.
They just did invade
No one
3 years
listens to
ago.
Warwick. Okay, Andrew, welcome
Hey.
to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're all in. You're caught up with the conversation.
Yep.
Go ahead. What's your thoughts?
Not much has changed in the opposition argument for the past 3 years. It's like just rehashing the same arguments over and over again, which is just like war is bad. People dying is bad. But then they don't actually admit to the point of like, it's such a child's take. It's like literally like level 1 tutorial.
Yeah, what a
take
childish thing to think.
Yeah, it is because it's devoid of the nuance. It's devoid of the facts of what's actually happening within Ukraine. So when you minimalize Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, just war is bad and people are dying is bad. It does nothing to the people that are actually suffering and dying at the hands of the Russian war machine. And especially when you're not even arguing for security guarantees for Ukraine so that will stop in the future. You are doing nothing for that. It's a nothing argument. Anyways, Russia's military power. Their military power adapts over time, right? They learn over time and they get better as time goes on. So it's not a problem. It's not an issue right now. By the way, I'm a 10-year Army veteran. Shout out to Wick. I know you're a veteran too. 88 Mike motor transport operator, was deployed to the Middle East for 9 months in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. So I can speak a little bit on military stuff, but that's not really what we're focused on because Russia fights with information. They fight informational warfare. Hello, they just gave millions of dollars to Tenet Media, which just disseminated lies to Trump supporters and MAGA media to lie about what's happening within Ukraine. That just happened. Like we just found that out last year. Russia is destabilizing Western countries from within. We're fighting ourselves. Russia doesn't have to even bring military equipment to NATO countries when we're going to defeat each other and then Russia's going to do the fucking dance right over our countries immediately afterwards. Okay, that is the actual fear. So it's a future issue in terms of military and like the Russian military coming across the border to kill people. But they're actively working against that right now. They're actively working to further that future thing that we're afraid of, actually, because it is a legitimate fear to have. Weird, because they've only done it throughout my entire lifetime. Twice in Chechnya, Georgia, Ukraine twice. They have troops in fucking Moldova. This is just a constant problem. But for some reason, the people that stand up and support Ukraine are like, hey, this is wrong. Russia's consistent invasions need to end. Oh, war bad. Hey, Ukraine, stop defending yourself. Hey, how about if you ever get attacked by someone, I'm going to have a third person show up and tell them, hey, stop defending yourself. Stop defending yourself. Allow that person to attack you. If you defend yourself, you're just going to further the attacks. You're just going to make the fighting happen and people are just going to throw fists at each other the whole time. It's like the war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not a bar fight. It is not something where you're having a nuance outside the bar and you're having a nuisance outside of the bar and you just need it to go away because it's inhibiting your business. It's inhibiting your place of business. That's not what this is. Russia is trying to absolutely eliminate the entire Ukrainian identity. They're doing it. They're destroying churches. They're destroying their cultural sites. They're destroying their history. They're trying to remove their language, actually, counter to the Russian propaganda of like the Ukrainians are trying to remove the Russian name. Well, I went to Kharkiv, which is where Anna lives. I was like, what is this? This is not Ukrainian. What is this? Oh, it's Russian. I'm like, oh, weird. I thought that the Russian language was removed. Why are all of these signs in Russian? Why do I actually have to install Russian language on my phone to walk around Kharkiv in East Ukraine? It is like night and day. Every argument has already been rehashed. There is nothing new that you can say. It is just redoing the same thing over and over and over again, and then hoping that like we don't know what we're talking about, or like you have a new point this time. Hey, have we told you to make peace? Hey, in my heart, I just think peace is good. You know what? Peace is good, but it would be better if there were security guarantees that Ukraine didn't have to look over their shoulder and worry about Russia continuing constant invasions because we don't actually have solid security guarantees. That is why Ukraine joining NATO is the actual security guarantee because of what NATO can provide. Also, Anna brought up the training that Ukraine provides. It is called Joint Analysis Training Education Center. It is called JTEC. It is in NATO, and we directly get information about drone warfare and what the Russians are doing on the front lines. Everything that they're doing, Ukraine is giving that back to NATO countries.
This is
so we are directly learning. I'm filibustering. I'm sorry. I'm
late. You've been talking for a while, dude.
Yeah, he hasn't been here. He can talk.
I know, but it's like you can't account for every minute he wasn't here.
I get it. You don't have a point. You don't have anything to say. You're just going to say war is bad.
No, I would like to respond. You're just continuing to talk.
Okay, respond. Let's get it. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's various things that you said in there. You know, one of them is like that I have to harp on again is like, yeah, I'm against war and killing. I don't know why that's such a bad thing. But this whole thing about Russia being prone to invasions and all that kind of stuff, I mean, like, isn't that equally true for the United States? I know that that's a rehashed argument also, but it doesn't seem that anybody can really disprove that fucking point. There's no country in the world which is more prone to invading and killing than the U.S. So, you know, I mean, this whole assumption that we have to fight Russia at every turn and blah, 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 because they're never going to stop invading. Well, if you go by that logic, historical precedent, we're never going to stop invading. So why shouldn't the Russians be paranoid about Russia's invasion of Ukraine? And in addition to that, you know, nobody addressed any of Lactoid's fucking points. This whole notion that Russia is gonna attack Europe and invade. Get the fuck out of here! What an insane fucking thing to believe.
I do have a question.
Do you really think Russia has any intention of going to war with NATO? Why would you guys want Ukraine and NATO? You want Ukraine and NATO to avoid a conflict between Russia and Ukraine because Russia's not fighting war with NATO. It's fucking insane. It's insane. You guys are fucking out of your mind.
Yeah, except feelings.
A 3-year fucking war with nothing.
Okay, a little order in the court here. A little order in the court. A little order in the court. A little order in the court. A little order in the court.
Over a million
I don't want to mute
fucking
people, but I will. Okay, I do.
Not yours, mine. Shut up.
What, me?
Not
you.
Oh,
sorry, Wick.
Okay, I'm like, what? I'm the moderator. I'm supposed to be talking. What are we doing? Okay.
Stop virtue signaling about my people dying.
I do wanna ask a question though, because this is something that I've seen reports on very recently, where Trump has hemmed and hawed over whether he would honor a call for Article 5. So there is a very real question at play of would NATO membership even protect Ukraine at this point, especially if America and Trump simply does not honor their deal.
Dude.
Other than NATO. So the question here is, other than NATO.
Can I please respond to that?
In a moment. We're gonna go in order here. Let me ask my question. Other than NATO, what are some security guarantees, realistic security guarantees, that could be given to Ukraine, other than NATO, that would protect them? Anna, you want to start? I'll let you start, and then we'll go to
I'll start real fast. Most people in Europe right now are considering the question. Finally, okay, we have been telling them for decades, but now they are considering it. That even if Russia, for example, attacks Baltics or Poland, then will United States or any other countries actually activate Article 5? Because you have to actually vote for that shit. You have to like actually say, yes, we are going there. It's not just like it's an immediate thing. So especially Baltics and Poland and every other Finland, people who have been previously occupied by Russia or like Soviet Union or whatever, right? They are very, very concerned about that. And that seems to be ramping up their desire to invest in their own military and not depend so much on the United States, which for me, I think it's a good thing, honestly, to not depend on the United States as much, because at the end of the day, I mean, they can fuck us over any day of the week, and we should protect ourselves first and foremost. And they also should invest in us, but that's a whole other situation. And when it comes to this, and to what agreements would be good, NATO is shaky right now because most people actually in Europe are considering, well, will there be NATO without the United States if the United States, for example, drops off the face of the earth with Trump, right? So any other security guarantees, for example, maybe an alliance between countries who actually know what Russia is and what it does, for example, Finland, Baltics, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Czechia, Slovakia, I don't care about that much. Fico can go fuck himself. But anyhow, point is that we really need to consider that sort of alliance that doesn't maybe even involve Western countries. But the problem with that, of course, is that we don't have nuclear weapons because we have been stripped of them by our lovely allies over here. So point is that France has nuclear weapons and UK has them. UK is not part of Europe anymore because they fucked up major. And now we have only France that is a nuclear power besides the US, which we no longer should count as an ally altogether. So in that sense, of course, any guarantees are good, but they have to be actually signed and actually mentioned, not assurances that we, trust me, bro, we will come for you if you're attacked. No, we need, if you're invaded, we will deploy troops. If you are invaded, we will produce, all the things you need, the arms, the things. We will really come through. We need those guarantees. We need guarantees that if our sovereignty is breached again, then it will be considered by people like fully actually helping us out, because we can sacrifice parts of our land, but only if there's something for it in us.
Okay,
that's it, pretty much.
I want to give the mic to I know Lactoid wanted in, and I know Nonsmoker wanted in. I want to give it to Dylan because he's chomping at the bit too, right? And I see you all, right? I love the energy, but we do have to go in kind of like
that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Lactoid.
Sure. In terms of like what sort of security, this is like going to be the hardest question, because Russia's already said that NATO is a red line. Like they're not going to accept NATO membership, and they're not going to accept anything that's going to be on par with NATO membership. They're not going to accept anything that would lead to the kind of response that people are looking for if there's some kind of war again in the future. And that's difficult, right? Because again, Ukraine's in the back foot. The Russians are advancing. And there's I think, real question of, well, eventually, if they keep going, and let's say the gains start to shift to be more exponential, like we saw in Vietnam, Afghanistan, or Syria, or something along those lines, perhaps they could even get more in terms of some kind of arrangements or agreements with Ukraine. The other question is, when we're looking at this from like in terms of what Russia wants, I think it makes perfect sense why they would insist that Ukraine doesn't join NATO. I mean, we can imagine some kind of comparable situation for the U.S., right? Let's say that in Canada there was an illegal coup in which the duly elected president was overthrown and replaced with a pro-Russian candidate. And the pro-Russian candidate made moves to bring in Russia as a military ally. You know how quickly the U.S. is going to launch an invasion? I mean, we were willing to end the world in nuclear Armageddon in the Cuban Missile Crisis, despite the fact that we invaded Cuba the year before in the Bay of Pigs. So it is absolutely within like a great power, regional power's interest to maintain a sort of sphere or power balance in the area. And this is one of the reasons I think why Russia will not accept NATO membership of Ukraine. And another thing they won't accept is they're not going to accept when it comes to Crimea, which is, again, what Zelensky's been talking about in the past, which is just insane. They're not going to accept a bunch of people in Crimea who don't want to be part of Ukraine all of a sudden having to go and join Ukraine. They're just not going to accept it.
How do you know? How do you know they don't want to be part of Crimea? Tell me right now.
Every poll that we have.
Don't let it pivot away. You never answered the question.
We have What
He
question?
never answered. The question was, what security guarantees can we give Ukraine? He's like, well, we can't do this, we can't do that.
Yeah, I don't.
do this.
I just said it's the hardest. I said it's the hardest question. I don't think there is.
Guarantee.
I don't think that there is. I don't think the kind of. I answered that. I answered. Wait. I answered
serious negotiation.
Yes, I answered the question.
Being serious in their negotiating.
Let me reiterate my answer.
His 24-hour peace deal was never serious. Okay. You come forward. We're waiting for a serious proposal, and you have none.
No. There is a serious proposal for peace. What I'm saying is that if you want no, you're not going to be able to have. No, I disagree. I disagree with you.
Without security guarantees, there is no peace. There will never be peace without security guarantees. Whoever tells you that is a fucking liar. It doesn't care about Ukraine. They just want to hold a piece of paper.
Okay.
Let me
Lactoid quickly.
Fuck you. You don't care.
Exactly.
Yeah, Lactoid quickly, and then I'll let them respond. So Lactoid, you got to finish up quickly.
So well, just keep in mind, even ceasefires.
Something.
Answer the question. What security guarantee?
I don't think that you're going to be able to negotiate the kind of security guarantees that you're looking for, like an actual serious deterrent in Ukraine.
Okay, then you don't have peace.
In the exact same way.
There's no peace.
In the exact same way that you would never get the U.S. to accept some kind of serious security guarantees for Canada or for Mexico. It simply isn't going to happen. Well, you have plenty of examples where throughout history where yes, you have ceasefires broken, you have wars come up again.
Berlin.
But just like you said, apparently if NATO is under threat, then these security guarantees also aren't perfect. There's no way that you can ever, for sure, prevent invasion again.
Try. You don't even want to
try. We can try. When the Russians have set a red line here, what do you want to do? Just let them keep winning.
Fuck that red line.
Try to push for a better.
All right, yeah. Say fuck you. Say fuck you. Sure, no, you're right. Say fuck you, and then 1 million dead later. Eventually the Russians are going to win. Great, wonderful. You really accomplished a lot.
Okay. Give it to. I'm going to give it to Dylan. You're up next. Dylan, it's your turn, right? Dylan, now is your turn. You can respond. I see you.
Weird.
Look, Nonsmoker, I see you too. We'll get you in too. I promise. Dylan,
un-American sentiments on a panel full of so many Americans. Okay, look. It's one thing to be like, if we can negotiate with the Russians to avoid a war and avoid all these deaths at the start and not have all that, that'd be great. But to be clear, if there was no NATO, if there was no United States, if there was none of these alliances, Russia would still invade Ukraine. I firmly believe this. The Russians have described ideologically, they believe Ukraine's part of their empire. They think it's an extension of the Ruski Mir. That's the essays Putin has written. These are the speeches he has given. And you can cite whoever the fuck you want about NATO expansion this, NATO expansion that. At the end of the day, if NATO wasn't there, it would just make this job easier. If anything, if there was no NATO, if there was no America, if it was just Ukraine isolated by itself, no Finland to back them up, no Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, no Eastern Europeans, divide and conquer, they would be more excited to invade. They would feel no compulsion to ever come to the table whatsoever, because they would just be like the Tuvans, or would just be like the Chechens. It would just be another sad chapter in history where there's an end to the book of the Ukrainian story. And so when we talk about 1 million deaths later, the question is, do you surrender, let them kill people anyway, line up the people who believed in Ukrainian civil society, who believed in Ukrainian democracy, who were fighting against anti-corruption efforts, who didn't want a Yanukovych-type figure to come back and try to re-embed the type of corruption that they've desperately been trying to pull out, and they're still trying to pull out from their own government, they were never going to accept that. And so, when you say, 1 million deaths later, it comes off as so hollow, you don't really care, because how do you avoid it? Because if we get to the hard questions, and this is the problem with Trump, and this is the problem when you say, Trump had a serious proposal to end a war. No, he didn't. He said 24 hours, 24 hours, 24 hours. That's all he said, just like healthcare. Concept of a plan.
He seems serious to end the war. I agree. The 24 hours.
No, he's not serious.
I agree. The 24 hour. I agree. The 24 hours thing is obviously ridiculous. It was ridiculous hyperbole. But when it comes to what I meant two things. When I said,
just say you don't care, please. Just say you don't give a fuck, and that's it.
No, I do. Look, I wanted a ceasefire. I wanted a ceasefire in Gaza, despite the fact that yes, that ceasefire has been broken a few times, and there was no permanent security guarantees that resulted. But I think it's a good thing when the bombs stop dropping and we just come together to try to work out some kind of solution. And when this expectation, hold on a second, this expectation that the security guarantees that apparently, because Russia poses a threat to NATO are questionable already, these security guarantees that are being insisted on are what the winning Russians right now have said they will not accept.
Winning
So
Russians.
you have a couple.
The
you have a couple
winning
like,
Russians.
you have a couple.
Okay.
Pass,
Winning Russians.
you have a couple paths ahead of you, right? You can either say,
Holy
okay,
shit.
we are not
Winning
going to accept.
Russians.
We're just going to completely ignore this red line, and we're going to say,
Yeah.
fuck it, we're not having peace. And then before you know it, like, yes, the Russians will continue. You're going to continue to have death and destruction, or you can analyze what is Russia's goals here. Why did this war happen? All of this happened because that Yanukovych that you were talking
They
about
refused to
was
look at that.
unconstitutionally removed. That was a coup that happened in
Should have
Ukraine.
happened. I'd do it again. I wish I
How
was
did
the
it all
one
come out?
grabbing.
I know,
Okay,
because
you gotta let him respond. Lactoid, we gotta let him respond.
You guys don't care
Lactoid,
about
okay,
that.
Lactoid, we gotta let him
Yeah.
respond.
Honestly, my
Okay,
problem
we
is
gotta let him
the CIA
respond.
You would have
wasn't
helped
enough.
out
Hold
on
on.
Maidan.
Yeah, all of you.
That's my
All
problem.
right, you too, Lactoid. Stop, everyone. Okay, we gotta let him respond to
They
you,
love
Lactoid.
insurrections.
We're gonna give it to Mercado, and let him have a chance, and then Nonsmoker is after Mercado. Mercado, respond.
Let me.
Anna,
got you.
Anna too.
I got you. So
Yeah,
this is like this is Russia's feelings, what Russia wants, and then if you would have let Lactoid continue, we would have got some more Russian narratives, and like we would have heard the real feelings because he was starting. Like, he was like, "Oh, it was a coup," and it was starting to come out
Yep.
there. So I actually
was a
kind of
coup.
wanted. Okay,
It
so,
wasn't.
So it
Coup.
wasn't.
The American Revolution
So-
was a coup, I guess.
yeah,
It was a
None of
revolution,
this
yeah.
matters.
Exactly.
I participated
So
in it. You didn't.
I mean, it's just more of like Russia's feelings, what Russia wants, or this without actually holding them accountable or giving Ukraine real security guarantees to prevent Russia from attacking them. Anyways, I'm gonna send the rest of my time to Anna.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, Anna.
thank
Before
you.
Lactoid.
I didn't expect that.
gracious.
I didn't expect that. But yeah, point is though that we really like this is just about the security guarantees is the reason why we care for them is because we are willing to sacrifice ourselves right now, but we are not willing to sacrifice people 10 years from now. This is Eastern Europe has been backstabbed by the West bajillion times, left to Nazis, to communists, to whatever the fuck, right? We have been, we do not trust any security guarantees, and occupation is not peace. It's not the end of dying. It's the end of our nation. I prefer, as a Ukrainian, to be stricken with a drone right now than to live in Russia, which probably I won't be live any long time there because I'm on a list for people to be killed off. So that's not your decision. Your decision as an American people is to either support us or not. That's your decision to make, obviously, right? You voted for that. That's your decision. But it's not your decision to decide what we are supposed to do about our nation surviving or not. We do not accept surrender because surrender means occupation. And Russian occupation is torture, imprisonment, deportation, death, and rape. That's what it is. And we do not accept that. That's one thing. Second thing, the revolution is such a beaten up point. I don't want to talk really about it. Millions of people participated in it. We hated that motherfucker because he didn't want to bring us towards the European Union, and he also didn't respect any right to protest. He made the dictatorship laws that prohibited, by the way, which your president right now is trying to do, the dictator laws to prohibit gatherings, to prohibit protests, to prohibit any sort of attempts of people to show their will. We were over it. We were over the
So
oligarchs.
did you follow the Constitution to remove him?
Say it again. I missed it.
Did you guys follow the Constitution when it came to removing him?
He fled.
Fled to where?
To
To
Russia.
Kharkiv.
Russia.
No,
into
yeah,
Russia.
to Kharkiv and then Donetsk, and he was still in Donetsk at the time of the vote, right?
And
Is that how it works now? A president leaves the capital city and then he's just gone?
revolution, man.
Like if Trump goes on a
Russian
visit, I
democracy.
can run up and grab the big.
He was fleeing the country.
This
He
led.
fled
This
the
is an
country.
important point
Okay.
because this
No,
led.
he ran away,
this
dude.
led-
It's totally fine.
Yeah, by the way, just to be clear, the Ukrainian constitution
What's
doesn't
the revolution?
specify. Oh
No, no.
yes, by the way, you can
I
ignore the
Yanukovych
impeachment
was in a
process.
jail
No, as long as they
cell.
run
You can
away,
ignore-
it's
wait,
legal.
that they didn't put him in a jail cell.
You can
That's the
ignore
problem,
the
honestly.
you can ignore the impeachment process. You can ignore the
way.
Constitution. You can disenfranchise millions
I mean, he
of
wasn't
Crimeans. Hold on.
wasn't
You can
there to-
disenfranchise millions of Crimeans and people in the Donbass who voted for him in a
Stop
democratic
fucking
election in
virtue
2010.
People of
Oh my
And
Donbass.
they
God.
voted for him.
But they
Not
did.
virtue
They
signaling.
did vote for him.
They voted for him.
Lactoid was such a
The,
yapper.
the 2010.
I mean,
Oh,
you voted for
yapping.
him as well.
Your
It's
ally
like,
comes
what
in
does
here
it
and
mean?
yaps for
It
how long, and I
changed.
can't fucking respond to a point like getting cut
My
off every 2 seconds.
allies. We're in
So-
the trenches
It's changed.
too.
Yeah. So just to be clear
It's
here,
changed.
if I can be clear here for a second, okay? So
Usually
You
I-
cannot.
Yanukovych won the election in 2010. That election was monitored
He did.
by multiple international observers. He was the
He did.
elected
What's your
president.
point?
Yes,
And?
here's the point. You guys ignored your constitution, disenfranchised millions of people in Crimea and in the
Is there a
Donbass
time between
when you
the elections
illegally.
and now?
Hold
You
on.
can't let the
Hold on.
fucking guy talk.
Hold on.
Holy
They
shit.
can't do
I can't
it.
Hold
stop
on.
laughing.
Hold
I
on.
can't.
They can't. They're just
I'll
gonna
mute
like, you know.
myself.
Once he
they
finishes,
can't
hold on.
actually-
Once Lactoid finishes, I will let you all respond, but you do have to let him finish.
Thank you.
Lactoid,
I am
finish.
good. I'm listening to this retardation with a
Great.
straight
No,
face. I'm
I know
good.
that they just say, oh, that's Russian propaganda instead of actually. By the way, all this
Because
comes from Western.
it is. It's
all this
dumb,
comes from
silly
Western-
Yeah, but you
nonsense, man.
won't even let him make a fucking
Then
Then let
point.
him
It's
fucking
so fucking
mute
Let him
powerful.
us so we
finish.
can
I'm
mute
not
us
interrupting him.
individually
Okay.
because I won't be able to stop laughing.
Okay.
Let
So all of this stuff comes from Western sources. This idea of, well, it's just Russian propaganda. Notice every time they say that, it's because they don't want to actually engage in the veracity of the point. It's a non sequitur. It's entirely irrelevant to the point. In this situation, it was an illegal coup that disenfranchised millions of people in Crimea, in the Donbass. The 2014 coup, you can look it up.
I'm
This was
talking to
100% what
Like,
was
you
the
know we're
underlying
talking to-
cause. Was 100% the underlying
Oh.
cause of what led to what led to Crimea, with what led to the war in the Donbass, with what led
No, it's
to the
not.
Ukrainian counter-terrorist operation in the Donbass, in which they fired unguided rockets at civilian population centers in the Donbass.
Never
This
did
happened
that.
from
Did not do
2014,
that. Never
15,
happened.
16,
Never
17,
happened. We
18,
never
19,
fired-
20, 21,
Shut up. You
according
said
to
your thing.
Amnesty,
Shut
according
up,
to Amnesty,
shut
you guys did. And then
Yeah, you
2021,
shut
like all the
up. You
shut up.
said your thing.
I did
Yeah,
not say
so
my
shut up,
thing.
please.
I did not say my thing yet. I'm almost there.
All of it was bullshit. I was
Almost
there.
there.
I'm almost there. I'm almost there. Right?
Land
I'm
your
almost
plane,
there.
land your
Let the
plane,
fucking
land
guy
your plane,
finish.
land
No,
your
This
plane.
is
I know.
crazy.
Look,
You're
it's-
so
it's- it's-
insecure about your
it's
fucking
3
argument.
versus 2. It's 3 versus 2. They had more talking time, definitely
Go
with
on, go
Mercado
on.
now, and I can't even fucking finish. So
Honestly,
yes, and then-
I'm
and
not
then-
even
and then-
that
and then I-
radical on Maidan, and you're making Lactoid believable to me because you guys won't
Okay,
shut the
well,
fuck
hold
up
on.
and let him finish
But
his
if
point.
you're also
you
interrupting Lactoid, I want to be clear. All of you are
Yeah,
interrupting Lactoid.
yeah.
Just land your plane, Lactoid.
Well,
we
to
do
be
gotta
fair,
go.
Anna's telling me to shut up in the middle of my point. So
Yes, I am, yeah.
And so this is the context here. This wasn't like this invasion fell out of the sky. It's not like Russia's going to invade NATO because of this. It's not like, well, if they're just going to invade us again, et cetera, et cetera. It's just going to happen. There's no
And I-
possible way to avoid this. No, there are like
Oh my God, are you
historical events
done?
that have happened since 2014 that explain Russia's actions.
Stop
And if we want
telling
over
me
yet?
bullshit
if
about
we
my
want
country.
peace, then we should be acknowledging those realities. Thank you.
It's-
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
you're
Okay.
highly acknowledged.
Now you
man,
can respond.
Sir. Nothing,
Anna.
nothing he said. Nothing he said happened. We never killed any population.
I'll
in
follow me up
Donbass
with sources.
before
I'll
Russia.
send you all the sources you
Okay,
want.
well, now you got to let
Yeah,
Anna
yeah,
respond
yeah,
without
yeah.
Anna's
interrupting her.
sources.
Yes, yes.
No, to
Yeah,
the audience. To the audience.
Okay,
If
but
you- if
now
you
Anna's
listen
got
to
to
any of this,
respond.
just follow
Hold
up
on,
with me.
I don't understand, but Anna's got to respond.
Shut it.
Go ahead, Anna.
Not you, Wick. Yeah. I
You're doing
love you.
great, Wick.
Anyhow, point is
You're doing
that 3,000 civilians were killed in Donbass. Only happened after Russian invasion of Donbass and annexation of Crimea. In Crimea, maybe they wanted to be part of Russia. Perhaps, we never know, because the referendum was made under the guns of Russians after the annexation and not recognized by any reputable organization, by any country except fucking Russia. Okay, so that's not the way for us to know. By the way, in 1991, the Crimea voted to be independent, to be part of Ukraine. So and so did Donbass and all the other parts of Ukraine. So that's one thing. Second thing, yes, people voted for Yanukovych. In my part of the country as well, like Eastern Europe, Kharkiv, for example, they did vote for Yanukovych. That's not disputed. Nobody disputes that. Yanukovych wasn't, however, at the time of elections, saying that he will turn us away from European Union. That was never brought up. Second thing, we were like on the course to remove the trade deal with Russia and to join towards the European Union. That's one thing. Second thing, he wasn't making dictator laws when he was elected. And yes, he was a Russia-friendly candidate, and a lot of Eastern Ukrainians voted for him because simply of the trade relations. So a lot of us worked in Russia. We had like some sort of connections with Russia, trade with Russia, all sorts of things. So a lot of people really wanted to maintain that relationship, whereas the Western Ukraine had a lot of trade and economic relations with Poland, for example. That's something you don't know because you don't know shit. So it doesn't matter really. So at the end of the day, that's what happened. And Yanukovych betrayed us. He changed course, and we were on our way to basically become Belarus, and the elections would be cancelled altogether. You are lucky in your country to not suffer for that sort of shit. Unfortunately for us, we live in Eastern Europe. So we know where oligarchs come to power and try to, become dictators. We can clock that. We have lived under dictators for a long time. So yeah, we had a revolution that millions of people participated in. It was a conflict. You're not wrong. Like there was like a huge divide between the people. Some people supported it. Some people did it. That's true. It's not a disputed. Everyone agrees with that. There was like 40-60 dispute, like 55 maybe even dispute between people. It was pretty divisive time, and most people who participated in it, including myself, obviously wanted to be part of the Western part. And I am from the East. I'm from Kharkiv. I spoke Russian my whole life. My mom is Russian, so whatever, right? It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So it really wasn't a coup. It was a revolution where our president used violent force against us, using Berkut special forces, right, to beat the fuck out of the protesters, to kill them, and also to prohibit any sort of protests. So we didn't like that. And it turned out to be 3 months strong revolution.
I gotta respond to this.
And that's pretty much it. And you can shut the fuck up because you are just a bot,
All right, well,
hold on. We do have to let Lactoid respond. It's Nonsmoker. Nonsmoker has to go.
Last thing.
There's a lot of shit that was just said.
I understand. I understand.
One sentence.
And I'm going to give you the rule, Mike.
I didn't address half of it.
No, and I didn't cut you off in the middle and start telling you to shut up. Okay, I actually let you finish. Yeah, I did. And notice how you did the thing that happens where it's like, oh, you're just a Russian bot, you're just etc. When all this shit is easily accessible on Wikipedia, on Western sources, you can find all this shit. And apparently, wait. Apparently, I don't know shit. But for those of you in the audience, you should look up Ukrainian Constitution Article 108 specifies specifically how the president can be removed. The Euromaidan insurrectionists did not follow that process whatsoever. And by the way, hold on.
This is crazy.
Hold on. I know they can't. Like I just let her ramble, and then I'm going to respond.
And zero values.
As soon as he's done, Dylan, you can tear him into him.
And by the way, when you go, Dylan, I want you to specify exactly what I said was a lie. Okay? And audience, watch, see if you can do it. So when it comes to the Euromaidan insurrection, right? First of all, the last poll that we have prior to Yanukovych being removed was in January of 2014. 45% of Ukrainians were in favor of Euromaidan. 48% were opposed. The overall movement did not have majority support in all of Ukraine. It had majority support in Kiev and the west of Ukraine. And by the way, Article 108 and Article 111 specifies what you need to do to have an impeachment, and they didn't follow that process whatsoever.
Yeah, we
and
did.
So and last point, the Berkut or whatever that we're talking about. Keep in mind, 13 Berkut were killed from the insurrectionists. Buildings were occupied before any shooting.
Yes.
Buildings were occupied by people with with petrol bombs and sticks and rifles. Who cares? Petrol bombs and sticks and rifles.
I think it's talking about
and if we want to say, well, if the police shoot people attacking government buildings, then all of a sudden that invalidates the government. Well, what about Ashley Babbitt? Then I guess Biden's wasn't a legitimate president anymore. That's not how that works. That's not how constitutions work. How constitutions work, if you actually care about constitutions, if you actually care about the rule of law, you have to follow constitutions. All of this preceded directly. All of this directly preceded Russian involvement when it came to Crimea and in the Donbass.
A dictator. We removed him. What's your point? Nobody argues with you. You're correct.
Okay, well, if you're not breaking the law, if you're going to break your own constitution, don't act.
I'm going to give it to Dylan.
Crimea wants to leave.
Dylan, Dylan, now's
He
your
didn't
chance.
want to leave.
They don't want to
They
leave.
did want to leave. The
Maybe
UN
it's your
polls
chance.
indicate they wanted to
Okay,
leave.
gang.
Pew Research
Hold on,
indicated they want to leave.
hold
Citing the UN data
on,
too.
hold on.
Most recent UN data
They're
before the
just-
annexation,
they're-
so basically a tie.
Yeah.
Have you seen the one directly after the annexation? 88%.
Oh, after the annexation.
From,
when the
from
Russians
Pew Research,
didn't even-
from Pew Research, a Western source.
Okay, you know what? Tell me when I can talk because I thought it was
Dylan,
interrupting.
Dylan, it is, Dylan, go.
Oh,
Right.
oh, are you kidding me?
Bullshit.
You've been cutting me off every fucking time. Don't act victim. Shut the fuck
Okay,
up.
Dylan,
Jesus
Dylan.
Christ.
Okay,
You shut
so
the fuck up.
Lactoid
No,
is
you.
very un-American. That's what I would
Okay.
say Lactoid is. Because if your first thought is, hey, if Biden hired MS-13 gang members to go beat up protesters and try to provoke shit, and then say, you know what, protesting's not allowed. You can't grow up and get in groups of 3 people. I don't care if I pulled out of this agreement in the middle of the night. I don't care if my security services wrapped screws and nails on flashbangs or threw it in the crowd. It doesn't matter if some people died. It doesn't matter if some kids were beaten. It doesn't matter if all that was publicized. Anything could be done because there was an election. So it doesn't matter if he does something illegal. It doesn't matter if Yanukovych does something unconstitutional. It doesn't matter if he murders his own people. It doesn't matter if he tries to get rid of civil society as a concept by trying to ban protesting. If Biden banned protesting in the United States after hiring MS-13 gang members to beat up protesters, Russia, you guys wouldn't be saying we need to get rid of Biden. Biden needs to be impeached. Biden needs to be removed, or we need to. If that's not
Zelensky banned anti-Ukrainian media.
Let me
Oh, he
wait.
did?
Listen to this. There's no response. It's not the murdering of Ukrainians by the government doesn't matter to him. Yanukovych banning protests doesn't matter to him. He does not believe in American principles when it comes to Ukraine. He's fine with them being controlled by an authoritarian government. Freedom's for me, but freedom's not for thee. So he's going to come here, and his main thing is, well, the Russians seem pretty provoked, and it wasn't exactly it wasn't constitutional how they removed the guy that was murdering them and banning protesting. Listen to yourself. There's law and order, and there's subservience to power, and that's what you're asking the Ukrainians to have done.
Zelensky banned media. Zelensky banned media that's opposed to him. There's a reason why Coach Red Pill is dead. There's a reason why Coach Red Pill is dead right now.
Okay,
There's a
Nonsmoker,
reason why Coach Red Pill is dead right now. And last point here.
Zelensky should have his balls.
Okay, do I have
Dylan
to
Burns said that I lied about something. He didn't specify.
Okay.
Notice how he never specified what I lied about. Dylan, what did I lie about? Specify. Specify.
I can go there next week. The week after.
Let's mute everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
I don't like
Too
to
much
use the
shouting.
mute button, but I fucking will. Nonsmoker has been so patient. So patient. And I know we're all in our feelings. Okay? I get it. It's very strong. There's a lot to talk about. But please, if I tell you to shut up, listen to me. Okay. Go ahead, Nonsmoker. I will unmute the people now. Go ahead.
Yeah. What were we talking about? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
So I thought, look, I mean, the Maidan thing, I'm not even as, really invested in that narrative as Lactoid is. I mean, I do think that Maidan kind of demonstrates that the whole narrative of Ukraine as like a budding democracy is somewhat bullshit, but, it's a Ukrainian political matter. I'm not going to say like, this or that aspect or whatever. Look, I mean, yeah, there's millions of dollars of U.S. NGO funding involved there, but it was a legitimate grievance with the elected leader, and he chose to flee. Whatever, it's Ukrainian politics. I don't have a very strong stance on that one way or another. I think we were talking about security guarantees before it devolved into that. And I think, there's what I think will happen, and there's what I feel like would be fair.
Just reiterate my questions, just so you know, right?
Yeah,
I'm asking
sure.
you, other than NATO, what security guarantees would you think would be sufficient to prevent further conflict?
Yeah, I don't. So look, it's not going to be the right answer that you want, or my chat wants, or anyone here wants. It's going to manage, I think, to piss everyone off. But I actually think, and I've argued this since the start of the conflict, or relatively early on into the conflict, the first year or so, that I felt like a really good compromise would be actually if Ukraine gives up the occupied provinces and then they're allowed to join NATO, and then I would like to see the U.S. leave NATO. That to me would make the most sense. But I don't know if that'll ever happen. In fact, I don't think it'll ever happen. But in my view, that kind of checks off a lot of boxes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. You said U.S. will leave NATO?
The U.S.
and
would
we
leave
join
NATO, yeah. The U.S. would leave NATO.
Why?
Ukraine would join what remains of NATO, and then Russia would annex the occupied provinces.
Why do you think that's good?
Well, I think that kind of ticks off all the boxes. I think it's what the Russians essentially wanted, a buffer zone, or they wanted some sort of control over, or they look, the Russians view Ukraine as part of their sphere of influence, right?
Yeah.
So I figured, if they get the territory that they view as historically Russian, and it fulfills
which is all of Ukraine,
of having a sphere of influence, they've already kind of occupied it using military power. The Ukrainians haven't been able to push them out, even with our support. The Russians essentially won it in a war. That's how I see it. Ukraine joining NATO gives them some significant security guarantee. It's not airtight, but it's pretty fucking good. And then I think the U.S. pulling out is just because I don't think the U.S. should be involved in European military theaters of any kind.
That's kind of unexpected.
That's insane.
But it's not the worst thing I ever heard. Surprised.
It's an answer, though. It's more than what Lactoid gave.
It's an infeasible answer. Credit there. Okay, it's an infeasible answer.
Yeah,
they're not going to accept.
It's not practical. This is just abstraction.
Well, if we're talking about abstraction,
the reason it's not practical
then
is
the peace deal.
There's no solution outside of reinforcing Ukraine.
First of all, Dylan, what did I lie about? Notice how you never said it. But Nonsmoker. Like,
well, I mean,
if we're just going to talk about something, if we're going to leave the realm, of practicality, okay, then sure, like all fairies and dust, magic dust, great, perfect. But the reality on the ground is, first of all, I don't support U.S. leaving NATO. But even if we did, the Russians aren't going to accept Ukraine joining NATO. They're just not. Like, this is what really triggered the 2022 invasion. Like, one of the main reasons
it's not.
It was NATO.
Off.
They gave a specific demand
Russians
several days prior to the invasion, guarantee that Ukraine will never join, and we rebuffed that.
Joined.
Wrong.
They have
Why did Finland and Sweden join?
I don't think they expected that. I don't think they expected that. This was in the middle of the invasion.
Then why didn't they invade Finland? Or like, why didn't they?
Because they're busy. They got their hands full with this.
Let's get just real quick.
Busy. Are you serious?
Yes, with Ukraine. They're losing all these tanks, guys. They're losing all these tanks. They're losing all these men. Right? They're busy.
We got to give it to Andrew. Andrew had some thoughts on this.
So American. So embarrassing.
It is embarrassing. I'm sorry. It's like it's the same. Like, you can tune into this and watch Solova. I am making the argument. I'm actually talking. So you can actually tune into this on like Russia Today and just get it right from the source. You don't have to listen to this like third tier person down the line like regurgitating it. Like, you just listen to the Russians. I'm telling you right now. Listen to the Russians. Listen to it on Translate. Put the subtitles on, and you'll hear them say exactly what Lactoid's saying. I give the rest of my time to Anna. Go ahead, Anna.
What if I just said that you guys were spouting Ukrainian propaganda and then refused to engage with any of your points? Like, how lazy would that be?
We did engage.
How lazy would that be?
Engagement.
No, Mercado didn't respond at all, and I engaged you specifically on everything, Dylan. And you said that I lied about something, and yet to specify, what did I lie about?
Well, for example, you lied about tank replenishment. That was one example of a lie you made.
What did I say about tank replenishment?
Well, I think
that was a conversation you had with Nonsmoker.
Tanks are being produced. Wait, you were talking.
That was with Nonsmoker. Go back and watch.
Wait, it was completely you.
Where are you right now?
Lost in the lies. I'm getting lost in the lies. That's what's happening. There's so much.
Okay, hold on. Before anyone else goes, just so we're clear, okay? Just so we're clear, because I am curious. So Dylan, and this is to you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Lactoid did have a lot to say on a lot of things, and he asked you in that spiel that he did, where was
Honestly,
he incorrect?
I completely forgot what we were even talking about. We've moved on. What were we talking? Can you remind me? Remind me. Maybe I'll remember.
Maidan.
Oh my God.
We were talking about Zelensky getting his cheeks clapped. Don't talk to me like, oh my God, how did you forget? All of you are yelling.
Yeah.
Euromaidan, I think, was the big thing.
Yeah,
Euromaidan.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, what did he say about Euromaidan?
That it was his argument, and I'll
thing,
steal a
but-
minute so he doesn't. So we can.
I honestly can't remember.
You're gonna misrepresent.
Let me remind you then, okay? Because I am curious what your response is here. Right? Is that Lactoid's argument is that Yanovich? I'm going to mispronounce the name. Right?
We're off to a great start, Wick.
Give me a moment, okay? My pronunciation sucks. Okay.
It's all right.
It was an illegally removal of a world leader, the Ukrainian leader, that disenfranchised the voters who voted for him. And his argument, Lactoid's argument, is that provided justification to the Russians to come in. Where is he wrong?
Just to clarify, when I say justification, I'm talking about justification for specific things, but explanation for other things.
I'm
not
keeping
necessarily
it short and
justification for
simple so
everything.
I can give it to Dylan so
Well,
Dylan can
that
respond.
means-
Dylan, make your response,
Okay.
please.
So it was. Sorry, you fucking confused me at the end. Say the first half again.
Where
I'm sorry,
the fuck
fucking-
is
Yeah, let me
God?
I'll hear
Okay.
it. Question. Point blank.
Point blank.
Did they follow the Constitution when they removed Viktor Yanukovych from power on February 22nd of 2014?
I honestly don't think it matters, and I think you pretending it matters is making you lie by omission. But this is the problem, okay?
Not following the Constitution doesn't
Let
matter.
him- let him answer. Dylan, answer.
By the way, you
Dylan.
voted for Trump, so I don't even think you think it matters, okay? So the first thing is, if Biden was to go out and murder his own people and was to do everything that Yanukovych did, you would support a revolution against that man in a heartbeat. And if somebody came up and said, well, what's the constitutional way of removing him as he murders us, outlaws protesting, says we can't come out against him, tries to gobble up all the press, as that's going on, and he's making these pushes that the Ukrainians are very familiar with, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to go file a petition? Are they supposed to go tweet on Twitter? Are they supposed to sit on their ass like you? Or are they supposed to stand up for their country, which is what they did? So when you say, oh, this unconstitutional, you're leaving out information that makes it a lie by omission. That's what it makes it, a lie by omission.
Wait. So when I say
Dylan.
they violated the Constitution, which specifies the impeachment process, disenfranchising,
Wait, just answer me. What would you do to Biden if Biden did what Yanukovych did?
So
Answer
this
that
is no.
question.
I will answer it. I want to point out though, this is not me lying. You're just accusing me of having a double standard. That's not the same thing.
No, this is
you are
lying by omission. Okay, if I
you
said-
falsely,
Hold on.
you
If I
falsely,
exclude
hold on,
certain information, you
hold
are
on,
lying.
Hold on,
If
you
I
falsely.
did-
No,
if I don't
no,
include information, you're lying by
Holy
omission.
shit,
No,
dude.
I included all the relevant information. I included all.
You are misrepresenting.
Can I answer?
No,
Okay,
hold on.
Dylan.
Can I answer? Wait.
Hold on. Lactoid. I want Lactoid. Because
Why are you
apparently I have to
getting
be a
on me?
fucking
He cut
third
me
party.
off.
I understand, but give me a second to fucking moderate because this has been a nightmare on moderation on my part. But we'll go. Okay,
You love
Lactoid.
it.
Okay, so that's the question at hand. Given that, as Dylan pointed out, and as Anna also pointed out, that the leader of the country, whose name I'm going to mispronounce, so I'm not going to pronounce it, who was removed, was engaging in violating the Constitution himself.
He wasn't.
Right? By shutting down protests, by murdering his own people, that's the
allowed?
accusation. That's
That's
accusation.
allowed, Lactoid. You can shoot your own people. You
Yeah.
can outlaw
Can
protests.
I just wait?
Yeah,
Let me respond
answer
without
the
you
question.
summarizing.
Yes,
it.
that's
Can I please respond?
the question.
Like,
Like,
it's not about
does that not
Maidan. It has
justify
been
if the
years.
contract
Let's
is
talk about
broken?
now.
Just real quick, Anna. Just real quick. If the contract's been broken by the leader, why should they have to follow the Constitution to remove him?
Okay, let me respond without
Yes.
having these guys interrupt me, please. So
Yeah.
when Dylan Burns accused me of lying, right? His lie of omission was trying to point to some whataboutism as towards my position on Joe Biden. I'm not talking about my position on Joe Biden. We can talk about that later if you want. You can accuse me. Hey, wait. Can you get these animals under control for a second? So when it comes to the situation here, you whataboutism to a different topic to try to point out some kind of hypocrisy of mine that's irrelevant to the question about whether or not I lied when I said that they violated the Constitution when they removed Yanukovych, which they did. Everything that I said was true. 13 Berkut were killed in those riots, and the shooting of the so protesters, those were insurrectionists who were armed, occupying government buildings and throwing petrol bombs, and they were marching. And they were marching on Parliament.
Well, there's a new lie.
You're lying.
easy.
Now you're lying.
Just
Now
make
you're
it-
actually lying.
Yeah.
Thank you for lying for us. now.
Quick, get them under control,
Yeah.
please.
Land your plane.
They were they're marching on public buildings in Parliament when the shooting occurred. Now, do I think it's a good thing when you have like death and violence between the government and between rioters? No, I think it's a bad thing. But that just because you happen to leave the capital city, just because you have police forces that are shooting people who are occupying government buildings and throwing firebombs at people, that doesn't invalidate the Constitution. The Constitution does not prevent Yanukovych from doing the things that he was doing during the Euromaidan insurrection.
Okay. With
Nothing
that
I said was a lie.
With that
Civil
said,
liberties, the
go
government
ahead.
no longer has
Other
a right
side,
to exist.
respond.
Period. End of paragraph.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
that's just your wait. You
give it to Andrew. Let Andrew
Why-
respond.
why-
Let Andrew respond to you. Let Andrew respond to you.
So we can
Berkut
move on.
shot
Oh my-
the students first, and that's what brought more and more people out to be in the
Yeah.
revolution and the millions of people that went out there. The
Let's
Berkut
talk
When
shot
did
the
they
people.
shoot him?
Okay.
When did they
We're
shoot him?
pivoting away. Lactoid can't talk about security guarantees.
When
He doesn't have
did
an
they
answer.
shoot him?
He doesn't have a solution, and so instead we're pivoting away.
When
to
did they
this.
shoot him?
Yeah.
Hold on.
can
Wait,
we
Mercado.
stop
This is
when
from Mercado. This is from
Here.
Mercado. Mercado. When did they shoot him? What month was that?
I'm not going to give you an exact month or date. There was the first event that happened. Oh, because
sure, wait. Was it before or after? Was it before or after the insurrectionists were occupying public buildings?
You're labeling them insurrectionists. They were protesting.
They literally removed the government.
They were not in the building.
That happened after. Are you shitting me right now? You think the government was removed first?
What were they doing? Occupying government buildings with firebombs?
What?
They weren't in the building.
This happened after the students were shot. What are you talking about?
No,
you know the timeline.
Wait. All of you in the audience, go to Wikipedia, look up Euromaidan, and look at the timeline. There was occupations of government. There was occupation of government buildings. There was attacks from the insurrectionists before the shooting. And they are lying about this. And they're just deflecting with Russian propaganda. You voted for Trump. You voted for Trump. Do you have a different standard for Biden? No, they're dodging the issue because they know that I'm right about it.
Okay, Anna.
Stay in the area. You wouldn't. Whatever.
Anna wants to respond. Go ahead,
Thank you. I have been. None of that matters, by the way. We are talking about fucking Maidan for no reason. We are supposed to talk about the recent meeting and security guarantees and all of that. We're not talking about that. Yeah, but that's not only that, but also how the fuck, like this guy, like literally, like is just he wasn't there. He knows fuck all. Berkut attacked us first, which is unfortunate. We tried our very best to be peaceful for a long time. And the first clash was in Institutska Street in Kyiv, which happened in January. And then there was another major crash that happened in February. Those were two major clashes where most of the protesters have been killed, which, by the way, very nice that he knows the number of Berkut that died, but never brought up the 100-something people that were killed.
It says 100 plus.
Yes, 100 plus. It's difficult to say because a lot of them have been cremated illegally by Yanukovych regime. It also is difficult to say because a lot of them are disappeared, so we still don't know what the fuck they are. There is a footage, of course, of the person with their head cut off being brought to the forest nearby, but other than that, we really don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that there was a peaceful protest against by students mostly, people my age. I was 19 at the time. There was a peaceful protest at the beginning of it that really started it off because they really kind of basically just said, like, we want to be part of Europe, we don't want a trade deal with Russia. And Yanukovych's response to that was to beat the fuck out of them, like beat them near to death, basically, severe injuries. So the nation saw that on TV, and most people who even didn't give it that much of a fuck about the European Union at the time was like, well, that's not good. We have an actual president who is okay with beating the fuck out of the peaceful legal protest. And not only that, but after that legal protest, he also goes on and accepts this dictatorship laws, which would prohibit the gathering of the people, more than 5 people, if I remember it correctly. It prohibited any sort of protest whatsoever, and also gave insane sentences to people who did protest. So like jail time, all that, right? So that happens, and that brings even more people to the protest, which ended up being millions of participants with the flow. Not every day, but with the flow, right? With the flow of the 3 months. So in terms of that period, the protest back and forth was happening, and there was like agitation on both the side of the protesters and Berkut and all of that. That's true, obviously, because, you know, such a huge movement will cause violence inevitably with a force like Berkut. But we didn't actually throw any Molotov cocktails or anything at them before first person was killed. And first person that was killed was Negayan, Armenian Ukrainian, very young, nice, amazing person who has been unfortunately killed by Berkut. And only after his death that the protest escalated to the point of actual real clash between the two parties. But what do I know?
I do.
No. So for those in the audience, you can look right now. Wikipedia, Euromaidan.
Go
look at the timeline. Look at the timeline.
Fair enough.
You will
they
see
can research.
Hold on. What she said is incorrect. In November, you had rioters that were occupying public buildings. They were clashing with the police. They were armed with sticks and petrol bombs. This was happening before.
Telling you what Anna was doing.
Before. I don't know what Anna specifically was doing, but Anna doesn't have eyes on the entire country. What I'm talking about is what was happening based on the documents and evidence that you yourself research. You can put in a little bit of effort and go look this shit up. This was happening prior. And also the reason why this is important. I'm gonna say why this is important, okay? The reason why this is important is because there's this narrative going around that you can't trust Russia because they just launch invasions of whatever fucking country they can. But the reality is, in this circumstance, there was way more context to this specific conflict, and this narrative is preventing us from getting peace. In this.
Here's the context. That, by the way, I'm sorry if we're going to be doing this. This is the last piece of context I need to add.
I can't.
The Budapest Memorandum clearly stated. The last thing, I just have to. Budapest Memorandum clearly stated that Russia could not engage in economic coercion against Ukraine after taking its atomic arsenal, and that's exactly what it did to make Yanukovych cave to the association agreement in the middle of the night, pull it in the middle of the night, which caused protests, which they have responded to with metal sticks and flashbangs to beat the shit of those student protesters, which caused the rest of the chaos.
Okay.
So if you're saying, oh, what, Russia didn't do anything, Russia caused the Euromaidan. Russia's the cause of it. They initiated it through their economic coercion. You just didn't read the prelude, man.
Okay.
Okay.
Everyone.
We
have gone over the Euromaidan thing. I want to get us back. I want to bring us back. I do, right? After I read these super chats, because I got to make a little money here. Okay. After I read the super chats, I'm going to ask one more question for you all, and it's going to be about the present day, the current state of affairs, and we'll get into it. Great, cool, everyone good? We got it all out of our system. I hope so. Let's make a little money. $5 from Zach. Lactoid, bald guy. When's your "Are we the baddies" moment? Thank you for $5,
That's rude.
Zach.
Bald guy, I mean.
$5.
Maybe it's on purpose. Maybe he shaves.
Well, I'm also bald, so I wasn't sure, right? But Testicle Johnson for $5. Lactoid is very upset. Anna blocked him on Twitter. He told me he was embarrassed.
I did?
Apparently.
I don't know. Did I?
It's fine. You did, but it's fine. You don't have to.
He's intimidated by her. He wants to know if she'll unblock him. Thank you for the $5.
I don't know. I don't know if I blocked you. I have
You
no idea. I
definitely
blocked
did.
so
It's okay,
many
though.
people. I block all people.
50.
I don't see how. I'm being harassed 24/7. I'm sorry.
It's all good. We're not here to litigate blocks. $50 from Dwight Baldwin. Thank you for the $50. Question for Dylan. This is for you. Why is most of NATO's GDP spending on military, excluding a few countries like Poland, so low? Europe recently made talk that they're going to 3.0 plus, unclear if they will follow. Please answer without deflecting to Trump.
It's basically like the peace dividend. After World War II, definitely after the end of the Cold War, Europe basically set into the idea that, okay, we have now entered the peace of liberalism. Liberalism, shall always expand through trade and whatever the fuck, and that it'll bring an age of peace and prosperity through economic integration and otherwise, which we're hearing Trump talk about the same logic right now. Oh, or economic integration with Ukraine's the best security guarantee they could get. But it was bullshit. And Europe did not want to deal with the political considerations of having to tell their populations that they're going to have to spend a lot more on defense spending. And now the EU is also willing to take on more fiscal debt, which it was not willing to do before in order to build up its defense capacity. A lot of it was free riding on the United States. I think a lot of it's been overblown to the point where you're just kind of lying about numbers. $350 billion in aid to Kiev. Like, these are made up numbers. Europe has passed this a while ago when it comes to aid to Kiev. But they need to spend more, and they need to build up their production capacity because that's what they lack, especially when it comes to air defense.
Okay.
Yep.
$5 from, £5 from Rizius. Peace is nice, but doesn't the form of peace
Wait, one
matter?
last thing. Somebody just said they checked with the Wikipedia, and they said the first entry, it says November 30th, violent crackdown on protesters. Just wanted to throw that out there.
So in November, not January.
No way.
Wait. In November, not January, right?
First of all,
November 30th. Yes, before January. Yes, before January.
Okay, so
if you guys keep
so the
talking about
clashes were
Euromaidan,
occurring before
I
January.
might just...
beating protesters for months before they did what they did. Yes.
We
Okay.
bid them.
It was clashes. The violence was back and forth. You can look it up. I mean, it's very
Dylan,
clearly
why
on
not?
there.
Really, the
Why
first
did you
day-
even-
I'm surprised that you're having to
stopped it.
wait.
We had
I'm
got
surprised you're having to get
30th.
this from your
Tell me.
audience when
Tell me
apparently
what
you've been in
happened on
Ukraine
the
for how many years?
I've been there, and I'm sorry you don't know what happened on November 30th.
Apparently you don't know either, because you didn't get it from your chat.
You have paid attention. I didn't check the Wikipedia because I don't need to go to Wikipedia to research the war. I don't have to.
Research. I agree.
Okay. Thank you for the €5, Rizius. 10 euros, so that was £5, 10 euros from Prussian Menace. Russia can't invade NATO, but they would love to and work to make it possible. These losers would make the same arguments to not defend NATO members as they do now for Ukraine. America has lost its balls. Thank you for the 10 euros.
That's European opinion, by the way. That's just all of European opinion right now. No balls.
$2
Yeah.
from cameraman 502, and this is to Lactoid. Would you support giving Ukraine nukes?
No, what the
Okay.
fuck?
$5 from
So
Gregor.
you're taking them, but you don't
But
support
we can
returning
take them
Why
though.
not? Ask the same
Yep.
question.
I'll just take them
great,
away.
great, great.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Five-
Yeah, well, anyhow.
$5 from Greg Yo. Lactoid, is your argument that Russia would only accept a peace plan that would allow them to invade again?
But potentially, I think that just like the U.S., I just do not think the U.S. would accept any kind of neighboring country.
Yes.
Like remember, we were willing to go to nuclear Armageddon when it came
That's your
to
answer.
Cuba. When it comes to Cuba getting what means to defend itself.
Okay.
Do I think this means that they're going to invade again? No, not necessarily.
10
How did
pounds.
it end with Bay of Pigs, man?
10
Give
pounds
up.
from Rizius.
I appreciated the Lactoid, by the way. I was rude with him, but I didn't expect him to be so clear about this right now. Props to
Appreciate
the
the
guy right now.
It is.
Yeah.
Props
It
to
is
you,
nice.
Yeah.
Lactoid.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
10 pounds from Rizius. Why does it seem like the Russian red line matters so much more than the Ukrainian red line? Isn't the point of Trump being such a good mediator is that he can get a peace deal honored by
Part
both
of the
sides?
deal.
Because the Russians are winning.
No,
Five-
they're not.
The Russians are winning.
Okay, $5
I
from
mean, are you guys
cameraman
arguing the
502?
Russians are losing?
Nobody is winning right now. Yeah, it would be
Nobody's
silly
winning.
to say that.
Even
And
to say that
Nobody's
with, like any size.
winning a war
Russia's
isn't
occupying
like, okay, I'm
20%
sorry.
of the country.
Winning a war isn't like a spreadsheet. Winning a war is you have an objective and it's political. For example, like Clausewitz, fucking
Yep.
easy peasy bullshit, right? That means, for example, if a goal for the Ukrainians is to survive as a nation state and expel the Russians, they have not succeeded. That they have not won the war, and they are not winning the war in the sense of expelling them, but they're winning in the sense that they are still exist. You go to the Russians, their goal was to subsume Ukraine, take it over. They failed in that, but they had other goals. And some of those goals are partially achieved when it comes to taking over the Donbass. They haven't taken over all of the Donbass, but they've taken some of it. And so it's like neither have won, neither are particularly winning. Like there's territory that's moving, but it's like point is stalemate has been the descriptor for a while, and territorially
How about
it's
this?
still mostly a stalemate.
Also, really quick, they said they were going to take Ukraine in 3 days. Didn't happen. And every strategic objective Russia's wanted to accomplish in Ukraine, they've lost. It's been
Yeah,
catastrophic
well,
for their military
I mean,
strategic
also-
objectives. within
Every
Ukraine.
strategic.
Yes,
We
it's all
also
failed.
They're
All of it's
occupying
failed.
20% of the country.
What are they occupying
And
the
nearly
original
all of Luhansk, by the way. It's almost entirely occupied.
It is.
What? can you say
Luhansk,
again?
yeah.
They're just saying that Ukraine is losing territory, but they're
been.
somehow also
Yeah.
winning because they're fighting.
actually,
Five.
we
Nobody
have-
said they're winning. We just said nobody's winning.
Nobody is.
no,
winning.
I mean, I guess in war nobody wins, but like the
Different
Russians
view
are
of
winning
the
on the
conflict
battlefield.
entirely.
Oh, I think okay.
We are not winning
Very
in the
deep.
battle, but okay. Yeah.
When's the last time Russia was invaded, by the way? When was that?
Oof.
World War II.
Oof.
World War II?
Okay.
Oof. Big oof.
Pretty
Anyhow,
sure.
let's move
Uh,
on.
Wait, what was
$5.
the point? Wait. What was the point of that? Just out of curiosity.
Well, the point is that's not something you can just like. They can't allow Ukraine to occupy Russia, right? Like if the lines froze right now, that would be uncomfortable for the Russians if they're occupying part of Kursk,
I mean,
right?
we have course, but
Exactly.
There's not
Oh,
going
no,
to be a peace deal
they're
signed
not
with
gonna
the
accept-
People's
yeah,
Republic of Kursk from the Ukrainians.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're
Russians are
gonna be-
never going to
Think of the Russian
and just on the-
Russians in
and
Kursk.
just real quick,
that's leverage that the Ukrainians can
And just real
use.
quick,
Exactly.
like
Yep.
if
if
they're
we
brought
had
to the table,
if,
which Trump doesn't want to do.
if we had asked right during the Korean War, like who was winning based on territory, there would be a point where North Korea had almost entirely taken South Korea, almost entirely. Like
And then
they
we
had
got
a
involved.
small sliver of land, maybe a couple cities, maybe even one city left, and then that changed almost overnight. We could also look at Syria as another example, where al-Assad owned almost all of it, and then suddenly
it's gone.
no more, right? So this idea that, they hold more territory right now is just not the metric that matters. Okay, $5 from cameraman 502, because I still got some more money. Okay, if the impeachment was so, and we're going to go through these quickly, so don't spend 20 minutes on each $5 fucking donation, okay? If the impeachment was so fatally flawed, guys whose names I can't pronounce should have come back and challenged the impeachment as a legal president. Thank you for the $5.
Just to be clear, like immediately following, he was like there's an arrest warrant, and he feared for his life because his car was shot up. But anyway, continue.
$5
Yes,
from the
too
Tribune.
bad he wasn't killed though.
For Lactoid, was January 6th justified? If so, why? Is Trump
Nope.
not having security guarantees with Russia's history showing America is not serious? Yes or no?
No, January 6th was not justified, and if it was as bad as Euromaidan, like when you look at the ratios and you look at what happened, then I think California would have a good argument to leave if they wanted to.
Okay. $10 from. Oh, I'm sorry. $5.
It wasn't
Oh wait,
bad, by
I
the
missed
way.
a
It was
lot.
the best
Give me a second.
moment of my life.
Everyone.
Sorry, just
No,
wanted
it's
to
fine.
stand for Maidan a little bit.
$10 from
Yeah.
Alexander Wynn. Without security guarantees, Ukraine would spend years rebuilding and depleting its rare earth resources while Russia fortifies its new territory and trains troops for a potential future invasion. Thank you for the $10. $2 from Tessicle Johnson. Talk about today instead of decades-old history. Well, we're going to get to that next
Thank
question.
you.
I promise.
Please.
$5 from Levi. Wick, you did a great job keeping that under control. No, I did not, but that's okay. We're still going and we're still having fun, aren't we? Okay, $10 from Feder Methodist. One thing you're struggling with on your show is getting solid left-wing voices that are strong rhetorically and able to advocate their point of view without tossing insults and logical fallacy salads. Thank you for the $10.
I'm not left wing, for fuck's sake. I hope
I've
we're
been
not
Republican my
more-
whole life. I voted for
honest.
Trump in 2016.
Yeah.
I've been Republican my whole life.
To be fair,
I'm
I was
more
cut out the
lucky than
most, I'm
usual.
sure.
Like, what is that?
true.
Take
But
that,
it's
Shatter.
tense
The fuck?
times, okay? Tense times, okay?
I have been accused of being a commie. Alert!
I'm a George Soros actor now.
I'm not. Yeah.
$5
Yes.
from Deej Nuts. At what point has the U.S. spent enough in aid to defend Ukraine to meet their obligations? Which is going to tie into the question, so hold off. $10 from the Justice 35. The pro-Russian argument is why can't Anna and her country just lose faster? Have you considered that your country isn't real? Ukraine can win this war. America and Europe should stop holding back. Thank you for the $10. 27 SEK to say Anna from Anna Holmgren to say what the fuck? Anna was there. Insult to say check Wikipedia. Thank you for the 27 SEK.
Sorry, again? I didn't understand.
Well, I remember that.
They were
Look,
backing you up.
Anecdotes outweigh
They have
evidence.
your side.
Just
They're on
remember
your
that.
side.
Just remember that.
Okay. $5 from Justice 35. I
Oh.
love non-Ukrainians telling a Ukrainian about her country. LMAO. Thank you. for
Anecdotes
West
anecdotes are more important than evidence, apparently. But anyway, keep
And I
going.
shouldn't say anything about the
Gifted.
U.S. though.
Gifted
Yeah.
Wick
Yeah.
TV memberships from Audacity.
And all the links.
Thank you for the gifted memberships. $5 from Audacity. I'm having a great time. Glad someone is. And then $5 from Justice 35 is the last one. And then we'll get to the question. The pro-Russian side be like, war bad. Ukraine should surrender. We need to appease Putin, man, because he's very scary. Effing clowns. Thank you for the $5.
Brilliant.
Let's talk about today.
Thank you.
I want to
Let's.
address this first to the Ukrainians and to the pro-Ukrainian side in this.
Just one
I
person.
thought to me.
Yeah, no, the
I'm the
pro-Ukrainian
only one.
side of this. I'm expanding it. Give me a second, right? Like,
I was like, oh no. I
if
can't do that.
if America does continue on the course it is, where it stops funding, it stops all aid, right? It stops all aid, it stops all intelligence sharing, and continues to just withdraw of all support. What
Mhm.
what does Ukraine do? What should Ukraine do? Can Ukraine still win? Go ahead. And how?
Well, that's the
What's the path to
isn't it?
victory here, right?
That's the question, really. So the point of the blackmail, essentially, and the pressure, right, that Trump is now trying to do. Oh, I think fuck we're talking about now is that we really will struggle quite a bit. We rely quite a lot on Starlink. We rely quite a lot of of American intelligence. So obviously we have a lot of weaponry that is, for example, we can't even shoot Storm Shadows now, long-range missiles, without American intelligence, specifically because UK and France, who produce them, rely so much on United States for them to operate, which I hope will change in Europe. But that's just, the reality of the thing. So it's quite difficult, but we don't really have that much of a choice at the end of the day, because accepting surrender is not something that Ukrainian public will accept. We know how it looks. It's our lives. You guys, I appreciate, the emotional investment and the enthusiasm, but at the end of the day, it's us who are fighting and us who are dying, not any of you. Although Dylan and Andrew are honorary Ukrainians, obviously. But other than that, it's just that at the end of the day, it's quite difficult to say how it will look, specifically because it depends quite a lot on Europe. So whether Europe will be able to ramp up the production of their weaponry, maybe Turkey will join in some sort of fashion. They produce quite a lot of drones and helicopters and all that sort of thing, and they really want to kind of to be part of the European Union for a while, but they have been having problems getting there because they are authoritarian and they also kill a bunch of fucking Syrians and Kurds. But other than that, they have some quite troubles to join in the European Union, obviously, right? But at the end of the day, it's just totally depends on whether how much support we will be able to get to have leverage and to have strong positioning to negotiate, which is what the United States was supposed to guarantee us. We never asked for them to join the war, right? In sense of like adding us soldiers, how do you say, boots on the ground or whatever the fuck the phrase is, right? In the United States, nobody really ever asked them. Yeah, so it's really not about that. I don't think they should. It's not something I ever like expected them to do. But at with the withdrawal of like intelligence and of aid will harm us significantly, and it comes to a point: can we hold out long enough for European Union to help us instead? Because Europe has been over-reliant on the United States. For example, Germany has donated fuck all, essentially, to NATO, very little, and despite being one of the most prosperous countries in the European Union, right? So there has been a freeloading of the United States, definitely, especially since World War II and Cold War and all of that, established United States kind of like the leader of the Western world and the protector of Europe or whatever the fuck, right? And that history, I think, needs to die. It needs to change. And I hope Europe will come through. But problem with Europe is like a bunch of talk, like everyone kind of knows that it's a bunch of like bureaucrats and talking and all of that. For example, there's just a little bit of a meme to diffuse the tension over here, okay? But back in the day when Russia attacked us in 2014, there was this joke that Russia would take all of Ukraine if it wasn't for Donetsk airport, because they couldn't move further because our volunteer battalions, cyborgs, they were called stopped them at Donetsk airport. So this is basically European Union, but with Orban. They would take the mantle of United States. They will be the leader of the Western world if it wasn't for that one Orban voting against them, So because of that, our future is really undecided, because I trust Europe just a little bit more than I trust the United States at this point under Trump, but which is not much.
Okay.
Which is not much, and I really don't know.
Yeah,
I really don't know how it will look.
Sure, I want to hear from Dylan and Andrew on this, and then I want to hear from the other side as well. So go ahead. Again, to remind you, if we continue down this course, if America continues down this course, cutting off all aid, cutting off all intelligence sharing, and basically withdrawing all support, 100%, what does the path to victory look like if you think Ukraine can still win? Go ahead.
Really quick, Dylan, I'll go. So with Europe really needs to step up. Like that's always been the argument. When we're having good faith arguments about Ukraine, Europe needs to step up their support significantly, more than just talk, more than just we're with you harder now because the U.S. has abandoned you. My opinion, I think European troops should go into Western Ukraine and protect and facilitate aid coming through from NATO European countries. And also that would protect some of the Western Ukrainian cities that get attacked by Iranian Shahed drones and etc. But for a victory, they will need significant European support in stepping up. But we've been advocating for that. Even when Biden was president, personally, I got involved with the Ukrainian Action Summit. I had to wear a suit and everything, go to Washington, and we tried to advocate for more aid because I felt Biden was not doing enough, because it wasn't, in my opinion. So I've been consistent on my position, at least when I talk about Ukraine, that it just has not been enough aid, regardless. So to win now without the United States, Europe has to do something beyond than just, hey, we're with you to the very end, harder, or like it needs to be a significant step up. And I feel troops. I feel
you think they will?
European troops. That's the other. I don't know. They're not really showing a will right now. That's like showing me like that part's going to get there yet. I really, my analysis is on Action Wick, what their actions, I'm giving the analysis right afterwards, and I'm just not seeing that yet.
Dylan, any thoughts on this?
Well, at this point, Ukraine faces the difficult position of surrendering now, conceding to Russian terms at the pushing of the United States, with the hope that a security guarantee that Trump has said would come after the peace agreement, which has not been outlined in any way, just like he said the healthcare plan would come, just like he said he'd end the war in 24 hours, just like he said all these other things. And our friends here today could not explain or could not give us an example of what would be, I guess, the more, we'll say, not Kiev shill version of a security guarantee. There's not a concept that has been drummed up yet. And so the Ukrainians face no security guarantees. The Russians could invade again in 3-4 years if Europe or the United States is distracted, say, with a war in Taiwan or elsewhere, or fighting on without the support of the United States, which at this point was providing about 40% of, I believe, arms and munitions, which is, I mean, it's not the majority, but it's still a sizable amount. It wasn't giving the majority financial aid. Europe had already long surpassed the United States. But it's not just a question of putting down dollars, because Europe has dollars. They have much more dollars than Russia. It's a question of having the industry to be able to take those dollars and convert them into shells, air defense systems, drones, and what's necessary to be on the battlefield. And if they want their dollars to be most effective, and the Europeans have already talked about this, first thing they need to do is they cannot buy as individual nation states. They have to buy as pan-European. It can't be individual nation state artillery orders. It has to be pan-European artillery orders. Not only does that mean you can buy more in bulk, but it also means that each shell is going to cost less because it takes more time to start up the artillery production and it takes more time to low down the artillery production. If you buy in bulk, you'll be able to be more cost effective. They're also going to make it so that they can lift the debt limit, which is something that's good. We're talking about a possible European plan of $800 billion being placed down, but that's dependent on individual European nation states increasing their defense spending by about 1.5%. And while we're hearing numbers like that, they still have to do it. They can't just talk about it. Also, there's going to have to be difficult political decisions. Investments need to be made where they're most cost effective. They cannot be made in whatever precinct in Paris, France is going to get you the most votes. They have to be put in locations where to be quite frank, the manpower costs are the lowest, the costs of production are the lowest, the red tape is the lowest, and you'll be able to get production up and running as fast as possible and be able to run it 7 days a week, 24 hours, different shifts. Because that's the type of attitude the Europeans need to take towards this if they're going to dream, let alone actually achieve, making up that 40% so Ukraine can have a strong enough negotiating position. They're also going to have to buy up whatever international stockpiles are left available. They cannot let the Russians outbid them, and they have to see if there's any way that they can work with Asian Pacific allies in the production of 155 standard NATO artillery ammunition, because they need more of those, because if America spent aid to expand its artillery production to support these artillery systems, but if they're not sending aid, they have to get them from somewhere.
Do you think that'll happen? Honest Engine, do you think that'll happen?
I honestly don't know. We'll have to wait and see. They've already made the decision about $800 billion investment. They've already made the decision about buying in bulk. They've already made the decision about the 1.5%. We're seeing some decisions be made. We're hearing what I think is of huge change, some serious discussion about sky defense. That means putting European jets over Lviv, over Odessa, over central Ukraine in order to protect Ukrainian industry and Ukrainian cities, now that the United States is no longer intelligence sharing or helping to protect them with air defense systems, meaning that the air defense systems we gave them are basically worthless now. Because, I mean, if we're not helping them with the technology, if we're not even doing the things that are no cost to us, that means they can't stop those missiles from hitting their children hospitals or apartments or military production, whatever it is, depending on how the Russians feel. So these are decisions that have to be made. Whether it'll be enough, the Ukrainians will have to wait and see, but they can't surrender or just pass down the struggle to their children, what Zelensky's already said he does not want to do.
Finish up, and then I'll...
One sentence. Just one sentence.
I've already said what I want to say.
Yeah, one sentence is just that the sentiment amongst the Ukrainians right now is just we need to hold out, basically. We need to hold out and see what European Union will do, and afterwards we can really make any sort of decisions, because as for now, like, words are just words at the end of the day, but we have made a contract with Baltics to make shared weaponry together, so hopefully that will bring some results, but to replace United States is quite difficult. So in that sense, we should wait. And Ukrainian soldiers on the front are like, well, we can wait out, I guess. That's the mood.
One last thing, you gotta have to seize the $200 billion in Russian assets. It's right there. Seize it. It's in Brussels.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. To the other side, to the Lactoid side. I'll call it the Lactoid side, and this is to Nonsmoker first. I'll call it the non-smoker first.
Non-smoker.
Right? Non-smoker first.
Strays.
Because, non-smoker, side. Right? Let's say that the mineral deal is signed. There's a ceasefire agreement. Trump says, okay, there's peace now. We're going to secure that peace. What does Trump do, or what should Trump do? Or let me ask it this way. If Trump negotiates a ceasefire, he sets up security, he says, okay, we're going to protect you. We have our economic interests. We have the 50% mineral deal now in Ukraine. And then Putin breaks that deal. Should Trump put boots on the ground and attack Russia?
No, I mean, definitely not. I think attacking Russia is a
or push Russia out of
catastrophe.
Ukraine, out of where
Potentially a catastrophe. I mean, you're talking the potential for nuclear war, worst case scenario, and even best case scenario. I mean, you don't want a confrontation between the U.S. and Russia or NATO and Russia. That's like a a war with a much greater reach than what we're seeing now, which means potentially many, many, many more people dying. Which is why I think the U.S. should not be involved in security guarantees in Ukraine. I think the U.S. should pull out entirely. All aid, just get out of there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to kind of go into what you asked these guys, but, look, I think that Dylan is right that European investment does indicate that there's a concerted belief in Europe that continuing to fund this conflict might give Ukraine a fighting chance, and maybe they do have a fighting chance. I mean, I've argued with my own community, as small as it is. I've argued with them about this a lot. I do think the Russian military is underperformed. I don't think anyone can argue that relative to the expectations of not just the Russians, but the West as well. There's always a chance, but realistically, I think, we've contributed more than any other country to Ukraine's defense. Us pulling out entirely does not bode well for them. I see the conflict ending at best in a couple months, with Ukraine having to sign a peace agreement on worse terms than what they would have to agree to now. And as a side note, the mineral deal, I mean, from what I understand, from everything I'm reading, a big piece came out in Bloomberg recently that the minerals in Ukraine might not be anywhere near like as valuable as they were thought to be initially anyway. I mean, I think that was the Trump administration viewed that as sort of a bargaining chip for Ukraine, in a sense of like, hey, maybe we'll give you a slightly better peace terms, but you have to surrender. And that's why there was that whole clash at the White House, because I think the Ukrainian side felt, okay, if we're going to give you these minerals, you're going to continue funding our defense. And the Trump administration, they're just not interested in doing that. They are interested in the new Monroe Doctrine. They want to annex Greenland and the Panama Canal. They want us to secure our hemisphere. They are concerned somewhat about China and the Middle East. They are totally content in pulling out of Europe. I mean, that's what Pete Hegseth said. They're not committed to Europe's defense at all. And I think that's the reality of it. So, yeah.
Hey, Lactoid, same question. If Trump does what he says and sets up a deal, would you support, if Russia violates the deal, for Trump to send military forces to punish Russia?
Not boots on the ground. I would support like harsher, relatively harsh response from the U.S.
Give me an example.
So what's likely going to happen is when peace is reached and if we're talking about post-peace because of this mineral deal, right, as part of the hypothetical, then a lot of the sanctions on Russia are going to be lifted, right? And so you're going to see kind of a resurgence of their economy in a lot of ways. And also the global economy is going to benefit a lot from that. It's going to have a deflationary effect because of the access to raw minerals and other resources. I mean, there's going to be the looming threat of like, not only are we going to reimpose all of those, we're going to impose more if we even can. And I mean, maybe even directly challenging Russian assets in different countries like Africa. Perhaps, I mean, there's things, Wagner, there's things we could do that are short of like boots on the ground, direct confrontation with a conventional military.
And to be clear, you would not support that, even if the deal's reached and even if Russia violates that deal.
A direct conflict with a nuclear powers conventional military? No. Like, this is one of the things that like needs to be avoided. Like,
okay.
And just to be clear, when it comes to Ukraine, like the prospects, I think of peace. I just want to respond to, I guess, your prior question as well. If the U.S. pulls out entirely, whether the U.S. stays or whether the U.S. pulls out, I don't think it's going to. It might change the rate, but I don't think it's going to change the sort of inevitability of what's going to be happening, which is it because of the manpower issues that Ukraine's having. You're going to see a overall kind of a piece by piece movement west in Ukraine by the Russian military. Some things that could change that would be, I would agree if the Europeans start sending actual troops to Ukraine, which if they did, we would have to have some kind of understanding that we're not going to, like, they can't trigger Article 5 if their troops get hit or something, like even in transit or something along those lines, right? Because otherwise that's a big deal. Or if Ukraine lowers their conscription age to 18, which I think is horrific for other reasons, right? I mean, right now, again, they're having to like pull up in vans and grab people off bicycles and away from their families and throw them to the front line.
Can I address
And so
that?
if they got to do it to 18-year-olds, I mean, that's going to be even more horrific.
Did he answer the question?
Please.
Just
He brought it up
quickly
2 times.
You can address
I
it, but just to before you do, this is the order of operations here. I'm gonna let you respond. I'm gonna let you have a response to those guys, and have a back and forth perhaps, and then we're gonna get to closings. And as we're doing this, I'm gonna share a link in chat because some of you have asked me like, where can I donate to help Anna's funds and things like that. Because she does fundraisers sometimes. So I'm going to put a link to her Twitter. I asked her. She said she doesn't have a current one going. But I'm going to link you to her
tomorrow.
Twitter. Oh.
I will start one tomorrow.
Yeah.
Fundraiser tomorrow.
So if you want to donate to her, that will be how you can do that. You can click on the link and follow her Twitter, and she will announce that on her Twitter.
Thank you.
And I'll do that as we go. But respond to that, and then you can have back and forth. Then we'll get to closing. Cool. Go.
Just one. I don't want to respond to anything like the major points they brought up, but I just want to say, like, this point about dragging people off the streets is like annoying the fuck out of me. Americans bring it up every time. You dragged people out of the streets to go to Vietnam that didn't attack you. You drafted people.
Yeah,
you
that was
thrown
fucked
them
up.
in jail. We are defending ourselves. Every war has conscription. Every single war. There hasn't been a single war without conscription. Up to sorry, I'm drunk. Up to 23, like 22 and 23, we didn't have even mobilization. We basically had just volunteering people. Most of people have been in 22 have volunteered to be enlisted and defend their country. That's one thing. Second thing, we have the most softest mobilization on earth because United States, by the way, demanded we dropped our age to 18, conscription age, right? Zelensky refused. Zelensky refused because he said, like, I don't have arms to give to people that are already at the front. Why the fuck should I throw 18-year-olds out there? And it's fucked up, yes, but most countries have conscription age of 18 years old. And we don't. Most of our people who are fighting went there voluntarily. Most people I know personally went there voluntarily as well. And yes, mobilization is a thing that happens when a country is invaded. And I fucking hate all of you that you bring this up as some sort of like Zelensky is dragging people to a meat grinder. No, he's not. The invader is.
Wrong.
Putin is dragging people to the meat grinder. It's just absolutely disgusting. Most of my fellow Ukrainians hate this point the most because it's our brothers, it's our fathers, it's our husbands, it's our lovers, it's our friends that being mobilized. And this point annoys the fuck out of the people exactly because this is normal. We are not doing anything abnormal.
Let me respond, right? So drafts are bad, right? Drafts suck.
They're not.
Right, you very rightfully. You
Not
very.
if you're invaded.
So does taxes. So do tons of responsibilities to the
You're
state.
right. You're right. Taxes suck. So drafting. I mean, draft is one of the most awesome powers of the state. You're talking about essentially slavery in one of the most violent and dangerous professions you can have.
It's not slavery.
And
slavery.
Hold on. Yes,
Holy
drafting is essentially slavery into one of the most dangerous professions you can be part of. When I say hold on, that means that let me finish a sentence. Okay?
The army that beat Hitler was a slave.
I'm not going to allow you to lie about my military like that. It's just not going to happen.
Okay, let him speak. We are distracting him, yeah. He's annoying, but we are not letting him speak. Yeah, let's speak.
Oh, Jesus Christ. So slavery is the forced labor of somebody that does not want to do a particular job. Conscription is you grab somebody and force them to do a particular job that they don't want to do. This one being direct fighting, warfare, with another country. In this case, it is definitely akin to slavery. I understand that countries do it. It's an incredibly awesome power. It's awful. Hold on, it's awful. I understand. When you look at Vietnam, that was awful. And you look at the real human tragedy of all the Americans who were forced into that Satan's armpit and died there against their will. That sucks. And that is a human tragedy that's worthwhile of taking a look at and saying, everybody in the world can stand up and say, that's fucked up. Like, yeah, there's an argument over whether or not it's a necessity. It is fucked up and it's awful. Now, when you're simultaneously making the argument, well, you foreigners should, this is what the Ukrainian people want. You foreigners shouldn't even be able to have an opinion on this, right? This sort of appeal to anecdote, this sort of appeal to identity. A lot of Ukrainians don't want to be fighting. And by the way, plenty of Ukrainians, the ones being dragged off the street and shipped to the front line, they don't want to be fighting. They want peace.
They're not.
I can point that out. I can point that out. They are. They're sent to the front line.
What do you mean you can point that out? What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
I'll explain exactly what it means. What it means is, despite the fact that I'm not a Ukrainian, I get to care about human life in other countries. That's what it means.
Oh,
damn. Wow.
Like, I'm about to go.
I know. Wild concept.
Oh.
Listen. How it works in actual reality, not this shit, like actual reality. We have an app called DIA. You have to register there and to be part of the called upon forces. You're not immediately thrown at the front, but you have to be registered as a potential reserve. Because people who have volunteered, my friends, people who I care about, I have been there for ages without rotation. They need to be replaced at some fucking point, okay? Because they made the sacrifice of going there voluntarily. And for a year and a half, the rest of us enjoyed that privilege of not being there because they volunteered to be there. So the least any decent man in this country can do is register as per law, martial fucking law, in the program and be in that list of people who are potentially be called upon. If you are caught by a police or by our TCK people, which I don't know how to say in English, I apologize, but basically people who are doing the recruitment, right? If they stop you on the street and you show them that you are registered, you're not going to be dragged anywhere. You're not going to be dragged fucking anywhere. People who are being dragged are not registered. They are breaking the law by not being registered, and that's why they dragged places, because they break the law.
Lactoid.
I understand it is the
I got a
law.
question for Lactoid. I got a question.
Law.
Lactoid, you voted for Trump, right? I voted for him, so it's fine. Okay. Do you consider yourself a patriot, like a blood-red blue patriot? Do you?
Wait, did you vote for Trump? Hold on, Andrew. Did you vote for Trump in 2024?
2016.
Oh, that's awesome.
2016.
Oh, I was about to say. I was gonna be like,
I mean, look, just to be clear, I voted for the. Let me elaborate.
I was the
got you.
party director for the.
I voted for the Libertarian Party in 2016 and 2020.
Okay.
And then it was
So you
2024.
believe in like self-defense and preservation and everything and all that, right?
So I'm not like, despite the fact that I have an American flag behind me, like I care about ideals and I care about the Constitution and I care about all those things. But like this sort of like blind nationalism, I'm not like that. I'm not that kind of.
Okay, so your opinion on the military, you just said it's like slave labor and you're basically going into slavery.
Drafting is, conscription is, yes.
So that is what is required upon. That's not addressing what I'm. So you had the opinion of the whole military because you were bringing it back to like the Vietnam when America conscripted people.
The conscripts, yeah.
He was talking about the draft.
I was talking about the draft. The people who are forced against their will to go do a job are essentially slaves of the state. Yeah.
They're serving in the same military so I volunteered, right? So I volunteered to join. Somebody that would be conscripted, they might outrank me. What the fuck are you talking about?
Let me explain
They get into the military and they work their way up.
Wait. Here. The farmers that chose to be farmers are not slaves. The farmers who did not choose to be farmers but are forced to be farmers are slaves. Does that make sense?
Lactoid, what happens? You invaded. What
happened? You're not making sense.
You're not conscripting people. To explain.
Andrew.
Explain. Just say the word.
Andrew.
What happens?
Like, do you honestly think that people being conscripted are like treated differently than people that are already like in the military and then volunteer?
No, their service is not fucking voluntary. That's the difference.
Wait. What do you think the definition of slavery is? Just out of curiosity.
I'm not going to litigate slavery definition with you. I'm talking about when a country is invaded and men or whoever else is needed to be called to defend the country because they're being invaded. They are being invaded.
Were they slaves?
Dude, there's cases where conscription, and you could even argue conscription is defensible. That's what Anna is saying. But to say Lactoid's point is that conscription, forced conscription, he's equating it to slavery because it's not voluntary fucking service. It's not that complicated.
If I may, just a moment.
Law.
If I may,
people's freedoms are removed.
Okay,
that's the reality
just a moment.
Of war.
Yes,
are you insane?
It is involuntary, right? They are taken against their will. But they're also paid, right? So it's not the same. It's not precisely the
slaves were
same.
paid in like food and shelter.
How much were slaves
voluntary
in the South?
It's the voluntary aspect.
How much
that
were
matters.
the slaves in the South?
You can pay slaves,
so you can understand.
You
perhaps,
can pay slaves, and it's
Lactoid.
It's still slavery. Wait.
Lactoid, let me finish my point, and then you can respond.
Well, your point.
You don't know my point.
It doesn't matter if you pay them or not. It matters whether or not it's voluntary labor or not. That's what makes slavery.
What should happen?
Okay.
What should happen?
Whatever.
Also,
what should happen?
Anna, why are you appealing to the law when you don't? When in 2014, apparently the law didn't matter.
We're not going back to 2014. We're not going back to.
There are different levels of.
I'm not gonna acknowledge that bullshit. Answer my question.
When we bring up this is the reason I have a problem with what Lactoid said, and I know I'm interjecting a little bit. Fair enough. I've stayed my own motive.
All right.
4 versus 2.
Doesn't answer.
Here's my problem. Right? Is you use this hyperbolic, worst case scenario language to try to paint something as far worse than it is. I'm not saying that conscription is good. Please let me finish. I'm not saying that conscription is good.
What do you even know about it at all? You don't know.
However, what I am saying is that when you try to paint it, especially you tell a mostly American audience, like they are slaves. Do you know what imagery you're evoking? You know what imagery you're evoking is the chattel slavery in the South, which is an entirely different thing than what it is that the conscript is.
I said it about Vietnam too.
We don't call them slaves. We call them conscripts. For a reason, because they're not the fucking same.
Oh, you're right. We use a different word for it.
They sing Ukrainian black metal.
That's awesome.
What?
Yeah. Listen, the American conscripts that were dying in Vietnam, that were there against their will, that absolutely was slavery. Yes, of course it was.
It's
not the same.
Dylan, you want to get in here? Go ahead.
So I've okay, I'm gonna be blunt. I spend most of my time in Ukraine with draft dodgers. Okay, they tend to have a lot of fun, and they dodge the draft. And I've interviewed a few of them. I'm actually going to release an article with a guy who joined the 155 in France as it was decaying and becoming the disaster it was around Pacross. We're going to be releasing that with Offbeat Research in the near future. So I think I understand the psychology of a lot of these draft dodgers pretty well because I talk to them quite a lot about it. And from my conversations with them, a lot of them think that if they go into the armed forces, they're going to be put in some LADA. They're going to be driven to the front with bad gear, with not good, maybe not even good enough training because the manpower crisis is bad, but they're not going to have the basic gear necessary to protect themselves. Air defense systems, an armored vehicle instead of having to drive to the front on your mom's pickup truck or whatever, right? This type of stuff scares them. And when I'm interviewing a lot of these people who were either in the army and left, a lot of it has to do with fear about not having the proper gear, and a lot of the people who don't want to join. And so I would say from the majority of cases I've interacted with draft dodgers, a lot of them would potentially join if the Ukrainian armed forces was well supported enough that they would be able to get good gear. A lot of them, but there is also a portion of them that would never join because warfare is not for everyone. To hear that buzz over your head, to hear the shells whizzing over your head, that shit's terrifying, man. It chills you. And so for some people, they'll break down. I've heard these stories. I've seen people break down. It's not for everyone. And so I understand, and I'm sympathetic to a lot of these people who dodge the draft, but we also need to understand that Ukraine is a country that is 1/4 the size of Russia when it comes to population. 1/4, 1/5 the size of Russia, right? And when we talk about these early volunteers, where does the burden of freedom lay? Does it lay at the people who made those sacrifices early on, continue to make those sacrifices? She said 1.5 years. There have been people on the front line for 3 years. Basically nonstop because there's no rotation options.
Without rotation.
While other people are far from the front. But then you go to those people who are far from the front, you go to Ukrainian society and you ask them, should we surrender to Russia? They say no. They say they're willing to negotiate. They say they're even willing to talk. But 91% of them are not willing to talk if the Ukrainians are not there and their interests are not considered. And so people are not joining voluntarily, but they're willing to continue the war. And so if that's what the society says, if you say that as a citizen, we should keep fighting, but I'm not going to join right now. Having a system that says, fine, you don't have to join right now, but if we need you, we're going to call upon you,
need to register.
is the best system that has been developed when it comes to nation states like this. Name me any small nation state that's smaller than its neighbors that would be able to survive if they completely got rid of manpower, like constraints. If they're surrounded by hostile neighbors and they said, you know what, no draft, our enemies can draft and attack us, Russia can draft people, we won't draft people, these nation states would not exist, right? It's very difficult trying to figure out where the lie of freedom and like non-freedom lays when you're trying to defend a country that wants to stay free. But Abraham Lincoln had to make these tough decisions during the Civil War, and the Ukrainians have had to make these tough decisions. And calling it slavery or evil or bad, draft is bad, but you don't have to make bad decisions when you're in good situations. They've been invaded.
My whole point, just to be clear, my whole point,
okay?
and I think, Dylan, you're getting it more than Mercado has. But my point here is not that like there is never any acceptable circumstance to have drafting, in this case slavery. You can think of circumstances in which it might
like
be
getting invaded
necessary.
by a nation that wants to erase your nation off the planet.
You can look at that, but that doesn't change the fact that it is a humanitarian and horrible humanitarian crisis and a horrible situation that anybody can look at. And
that's the same thing as saying
war is bad.
It absolutely is the same thing as saying death is bad.
Can I get through?
Hold on. You gotta let Lactoid finish.
Lactoid, come
finish,
on,
please.
I've been very respectful, Wick, to these people. Okay. All I'm saying is that when you look at situations like this, like drafts should be a absolute last resort. They should be intensely scrutinized. They should always be under review. They should not be treated flippantly. And you can't say, like, when push comes to shove, if you have to, like, you're having manpower issues and you have to force people into the military, it undermines this argument of like, well, the Ukrainian people want to fight. Like, we want to organize and fight back. Like, yeah, there's some. But there's a whole bunch of people who don't, and those individuals, like their choice, should be factored into the calculation.
But if we were to make this, if we were to make this comparison, though,
they can't even stop interrupting you.
If we're to make this comparison, though, in World War II, after Pearl Harbor, the vast majority of Americans wanted to go and beat up the Japanese, right? We got to go there. We had the fucking cool Disney cartoons, you know, super racist, whatever. Anyway, when that was happening, right? When that was happening, do you think if you went door to door and said, sir, it's time for you to go to Iwo Jima? I don't think most people would sound very excited. Most would probably say no. That's why 62% of Americans during World War II who served in the armed forces were drafted. That was a difficult decision we made as a nation because we believed we had to respond after we were attacked, and we felt like liberating Europe was something that was within our interests, and some would even argue it was the right thing to do, right? Now, Ukraine has been invaded. Ukraine is making difficult decisions. And you say, oh, it needs review. The fact that we're having a discussion about mobilizing 18-year-olds when a regime that probably didn't care about its own people would have long ago said, of course, the 18-year-olds are the youngest. They're the healthiest. Get them straight to the front. We have them in the university classes. We can literally go to their college classes, pick them out of the rooms while they're having the classes, and line them up onto the buses. They know where they are. Exactly. So they could make these decisions. They've chosen not to because they care about the demographic future of the state due to the post-Soviet birth collapse.
There's also a political aspect of that.
There's also a political aspect, but to be clear,
it would be incredibly unpopular to draft 18-year-olds.
It would be unpopular, but it's also the situation where it would be a question of, well, what do the Ukrainian people want? Because if the Ukrainian people are saying the majority want to continue to fight, then they're also going to have to make difficult decisions to continue that fight. Just like if you would have asked the majority of Americans during World War II, hey, do you like all these sacrifices we're going to have to make with this program and that program? You're going to have to buy this bond or that bond. Most Americans would probably say no. But if they want to carry out the war, those are the necessary sacrifices you have to make. The majority of Ukrainians are not willing to surrender. So I
understand your point. And I don't disagree that like the sort of like stated idealistic will of the people is obviously going to be relevant to the calculation. All I'm saying is that what's also relevant to the calculation is casualties. And what's also relevant to the calculation is how many people are being forced to potentially be casualties or be casualties against their will.
Can I ask maybe
this does matter to the calculation when we're talking about whether, like, how should we pursue peace and the urgency of how we should be approaching peace.
I don't know the answer. This is important. This is in context. Please, let me ask this question because I want to know. My audience does want to know.
I won't talk for the next 5 minutes. I promise. At least 5 minutes.
There's no way.
Okay. I'll agree with this on the condition that we hold the same standard to the Russians. The fact that their soldiers that are joining at the end of 2024 that are volunteering for these big $30,000 down payment contracts, which goes really fucking far in Russia, they're 50 years old. So if we cheat that same like, ooh, we have to make the decision about peace. We have to put that on the Russians too. We can't pretend that their manpower crisis is good just because they pretend it is.
Okay, can I ask?
Wait, let me respond to that.
No, stop, because this is a question pertinent because it matters.
Okay.
How much of the Ukrainian forces is conscripted? How much? What's the percentage?
I don't have that number.
Lower than
I don't know. I know it's significant.
I would like to
I don't
know
the specific amount.
Because if it's
I
10%,
I don't even know if Ukraine knows the specific
can
amount
I
at this point.
say?
yeah. Oh, do you know?
The
Anna?
exact number is not allowed. Is not like actually accessible.
Oh.
But what is accessible is in 22 and 23, the 75% of people were volunteers, around that number, and then afterwards there has to be mobilization. We don't have total mobilization, by the way. Still, we have partial mobilization, and that has been people have been drafted since then because of you can only have so much volunteers, people. It's reality. Like, look at the map of how many people in Europe right now want to defend their country if it's attacked. It's never above 50%. The only mad lads that are above 50% are us and Finns, okay? Finland and Ukrainians are two people who are above 60%. Finland's are mad. They have like 70% of people who said they want to defend their country. And the most people are below fucking 30, right? They're below 20. There's never ever been a thing when you're attacked and everyone's like, yes, I want to go on the front lines. Most of my friends who are currently not on the front lines, which by the way, you push that propaganda, Lactoid, but if you go outside in the cities, men everywhere, okay? In Ukraine, in Kharkiv, in Kiev, men everywhere walking around. Not all men are thrown to the fucking meat grinder. Most of them are going to work. Most of them are doing their thing. Only 1 million people right now are at the front. Half at the front, half reserve out of that 1 million people. So we have much more people than 1 million, I assume, right? And it's just that most people are not even thrown at the front lines. They have to be registered. I want to again.
Which by law you have to be
that.
registered, right?
Yes, you have to be registered by law, and in the program, hold DIA. So if you're not registered, then you have trouble. That's what I pointed out, and nobody wants to address it because it's just, fact you can't say anything about. And if most of my friends who are not fucking dodgers, okay, are registered, they go to work every day, and if they're stopped by...
crowd.
Yeah, you do actually, Dylan. Fuck you with the fucking drafters. I hang out with soldiers, okay? So anyhow, point is that Dylan aside, right? You actually show people the app and you show you're registered, and that's it.
Mhm.
Okay? If you're not, then you are arrested and unfortunately dragged, which you probably saw in the videos you're talking about.
Many videos,
Yeah, that happens, definitely. Yeah, because they are breaking the law during the martial law of all times, okay? So do I want my loved ones and my friends and everyone to be on the front line? No, I don't. Do they have to?
I don't want them either.
Yes.
Be on the front line.
I really, honestly, just don't believe you and don't care, to be quite
You're disingenuous as hell.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Ceasefire, that's entirely disingenuous. I don't actually...
Yeah, without security guarantees, it means nothing. Without security guarantees, it means nothing.
I want to respond.
Words.
I want to respond to Dylan, because Dylan's the only one making points.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. No problem.
Dylan,
help me.
He's on your side.
Ask your question. Ask your question.
I could be way more mean than I'm going to be.
Ask your question.
I'm a very nice guy. Dylan, going back to when you said you can criticize Russia for the same thing. I think that Russia's manpower issues, largely because it's a larger country, are not the same kind of issues that Ukraine is facing. But I will agree with one thing, which is that the Russian conscripts, the Russians that have been drafted and also thrown into combat, I feel incredibly bad for them. And I feel sorry for them. And I think that's like a black mark on the Russian state as well. And the fact that a lot of them are dying,
not the actual war.
And a lot of them who are dying, a lot of them who have died or are dying, right? I think that's a tragedy. And I want to say on both sides, by the way, because both sides I've seen do this sort of war porn that's been going on Twitter, where people call the Russians orcs, or the Russians will call the Ukrainians pigs, and they'll insult each other. when some of those soldiers like didn't even choose to be there and they're pleading for their lives when bombs are falling on them. And then you're gonna people are gonna celebrate this, then at the same time say that I don't care about human life. It's really disgusting. Really,
Lactoid,
really gross.
haven't you considered that war is actually good?
I know.
Okay, so
I want invaders
War
to
is
blow
bad. I'm glad we're at the
fuck
same
up.
point when I joined.
Okay,
We're at the same
that's
point.
No,
fine.
no, you're
War
right,
is
dude.
bad.
War is good. You've
Answer the
convinced me.
question. Answer the question,
not trying
Dylan,
to.
and then we're gonna wrap up. Okay.
So I agree that Russia's
Thank
a bigger
you.
country.
I
They have more
can't
people, right? But I also don't think and this is not an insult. This is just something I really want to get across to people. War is not like a spreadsheet, right? It's not as simple as Russia has these many people, Ukraine has these many people, Russia wins. Then you could avoid the whole war altogether if it was as simple as that. But Japan has beaten Russia. The Chechens have beaten Russia before. They've lost wars before, so it isn't simple as like a spreadsheet. And so I think there's more to it. For example, I do think that the Ukrainians probably have much more of a will to fight than the Russians, honestly speaking.
Yes.
When it comes to how
Yes.
much their society and their everyday life can be disturbed by the war, I think the Ukrainians, from their 12-hour-a-day blackouts, from the constant bombings that they have to deal with in major metropolitan areas and not largely just oil refineries, they have largely shown themselves to be willing to put up with a lot and stay within the country. Where the Russian public, while the war continues to spill over more, have been largely sheltered from the effects of the war. While some of the economic effects are starting to break through, even despite the efforts of the Russian government, I do think when we talk about manpower, the Ukrainians do have more will when it comes to that, and there is less of a manpower requirement for the defender than there is the attacker. So making just a cold, calculated, plus the Russian attack strategy is literally attack. So their way of pressure is dependent upon being willing to take high casualties, right? So I don't think it is as simple as Russia has more people. Therefore, when you make this calculation, it's part of the reason why they have to pay $30,000 down payments. That's crazy. That's the type of stuff that will bankrupt Russia when it comes to their long-term, social services they're going to have to provide to all these veterans for the next 40, 50 years. So I do think that when we talk about the manpower problem with the Russians, sometimes we undersell exactly how negative it could be. Okay. And we talk about, and none of this is about being a black spot when it comes to the draft. I agree that the draft is bad, but I'm not trying to talk about see, the Russians are also bad. See, everyone's bad. My point is the Russians are going to do the draft no matter what moral argument we make. We could come out with the Bible. We can come out with, Rousseau and Voltaire would have disagreed. No, they don't give a fuck. Right? They're going to draft people if it means that they can attack and do these invasions and conquer territory or achieve their objectives. And so as a smaller nation, to restrict yourself from the draft in a situation like this is national suicide. And so Ukraine made the very difficult decision of having to engage in a sad practice that has been, kind of standard across the globe for hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has been.
Okay.
So, there was another thing I was going to say, but I'll just let it go.
Okay. Well, you'll get closing, so maybe you'll remember it, right? Gang, this has been a discussion, gang. Okay, a discussion of all discussions. Okay. This is an ongoing situation. There's a lot of moving parts. Tomorrow might make all these points moot as Trump decides to change his fucking mind, or Finland or Poland decides to, okay, we're just going into Ukraine now. We don't know. We don't know what's coming, is what I'm saying. The fog of war is thick, and we can never predict the future. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for engaging in this rousing debate. And I want to give each of you a chance to shout yourselves out, tell people where they can find you. I have links to all of them in my YouTube description. If you've enjoyed this content, like and subscribe. Anna, I'll let you go first. Closing thoughts.
No, damn. Well, this is about as exhausting as it usually is. My real life is life in war, and all of my probably closest people are at the front right now. So that's what I care about. And nothing has been accomplished in this fucking debate as it usually is, but I just am here because Wick is cool and he asked me to. Okay, that's the only reason. And I'm tired, to be honest with you. This is a little bit emotional, but I'm tired of this retarded ass regurgitation of everything we heard bajillion times. We don't really need any of that at the time like this. All of my people want is to know where the fuck we stand in terms of like support. In terms of support of United States, it's quite clear where this is going if you have fucking eyes, and you can see that Trump is basically Russia's bitch at this point. So I really hope that Europe comes through and they see what we all have told them. Western Europe and Eastern Europe are two very different things, to be honest with you all. I know Americans don't really understand that, but Eastern Europe has never been treated like equal or like a partner or like anything of that sort. And I do hope there is a future where that's true. And it is, in my opinion, up to the Europe to decide, not to United States, because I do agree with like a lot of United States people who say that why the fuck Europe is not paying like as much as United States is paying for NATO and all of that. I do agree with that, because at the end of the day, it's our fucking continent and it's our fucking nemesis that occupied half the fucking Europe before, and it's really like up to Europe to decide, and I hope they will. I hope they will decide for once not to fuck us over. Holy shit. Like Eastern Europe has been historically thrown to the wolves like more times than I have fingers to count. And I do hope people realize that we need to put a fucking end to it. We are not Russian hostages. We are people. We're people with our own national identities. We're people with our own drive. And we are people who deserve to have everything else that everyone else has, okay?
Thank you.
And I really, really want that to happen, but we shall see. As far as United States go, I don't know. I am of the opinion that they're not an ally, and there won't be. So we should rely on ourselves and on Europe to figure out what's next in this fucking world, okay?
Okay. Gang, I've provided a link to her Twitter where you can go. You can follow her. She will have a fundraiser apparently tomorrow, and if you want to donate to her, I encourage you to do so. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry it's exhausting, but I do appreciate
it is,
yeah. And coming. So thank you. Nonsmoker, go ahead.
Yeah, twitch.tv/non_smoker. So, yeah, a few things. I mean, despite what everybody thinks of me at the end of these panels every single time, I'm really not like super pro Russia. I've just, I have a dissenting view on the war. I would call it that. And I don't support the U.S. funding the Ukrainian war effort. I think it was a mistake from the beginning. I happen to think the war is tragic, and, the Russians winning, which I think is an inevitability, I don't celebrate that. I'm not happy about that. I don't feel, in any way like even, I don't know, like I don't think that's a positive outlook for the world moving forward, not because it's Russia, but just, the fact that we're breaking down into massive scale wars and, spheres of influence developing that are, I don't know, rubbing up against one another violently, I think is like bad for everybody. So yeah, I mean, I'm pro peace. I despite what Andrew says, I think war bad. I don't know. I think it should be avoided at all costs. That said, I understand the Ukrainian position in wanting to fight for their sovereignty. I just don't think that the U.S. supporting it has anything to do with Ukrainian sovereignty. I think it's that the U.S. views Ukraine as an opportunity to hurt our adversary. And that's all it's ever been. And Ukraine got rugged. And I think that was the plan all along. And it sucks. This is sort of our thing. We do this time and time and time again all over the world. And we're probably going to continue to do it. And so I oppose that. One last thing. I'm totally open to any 1v1s. I'm way more rational than I might seem to be on here. So please, if anyone's interested in that, hit me up.
Well, thank you for being here. Link to his channel is in my YouTube description. Check him out. Andrew Mercado, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks again, Wick, for having me on Mercado Media. So, if anything, today we learned just rehashing of the same narratives. It's just kind of like feelings without facts. War is bad. That's why Russia should stop doing it. Russia should stop carrying out wars so that way we can have peace. Because unless Russia stops their consistent invasions of countries, we're going to continuously have to keep defending the countries that are being invaded. It's too bad we didn't give as much support to Georgia or Chechnya and really laid a framework to really stand up against this before Russia put soldiers in Donbass and Crimea and then did a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We really should. We were really weak on that. I do agree with Anna. Europe needs to step up significantly. I've always said that. Like, it is their backyard. Ukraine is literally like the shield for Europe right now, fighting against these Russian orcs that are trying to take over their country. And if Europe doesn't step up and significantly do what, if it's really like a threat on democracy, they need to act like it. Okay, they really need to. And that's still, with all of my criticisms of the U.S. pulling out and how bad it is, and the precedent that it sets, all is still valid. It's like two things can be true at the same time, right? Nuance is very important. Multiple reasons. Russia's feelings, I don't give a fuck. Russia continues imperialist invasions of independent sovereign nations. You know, we signed multiple security agreements with Ukraine. The U.S. did, to defend them if they're attacked, and it is up to us to follow through with those agreements. So, and also, there will be no peace in Ukraine without security guarantees, unless Ukraine has a solid foundation, not just words, not just a document that's signed by Russians, because they break every document ever. It needs to be solid security, something that Ukrainians are comfortable with, because that's what actually matters. Okay. Thank you again, Wick, for having me on. Mercado Media on YouTube and social media. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Links to his stuff is in my YouTube description. Dylan Burns, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just it's kind of very disappointing. I mean, but it's kind of, I don't know, it's not to be expected to see all this talk about like peace through strength, but then the entirety of a negotiating strategy is just giving Russians whatever they want, just conceding on every term before the negotiations have even started. We don't know if the kidnapped children are being returned. We don't know if there's going to be an all-for-all POW exchange. We don't know if the Russians are ever going to stop hunting civilians in Kherson. The drone attacks are only escalating. I don't see any effort by Trump to really undercut Russia's ability to make war. And one question I would leave the viewers with is, has there been a single thing that Trump has done that has made it more difficult in any way for the Russians to carry out the war? And I think the answer to that is no. If anything, everything he has done has made it easier for them to carry out the war. America has made French bravery shine by comparison, which is, not necessarily the easiest thing. And I just do want to throw out there that the inevitability of Russian victory, the inevitability of Russian conquest, I don't think it's real. I also don't think that the inevitability of the rug pull is real. I think that we accept these things are real because it's easier to accept that we're powerless, to accept that we can't really do anything, that these historical trends are going to end up to this point, that there was no way for the Russians to lose this war, because look at the spreadsheet. I mean, then they obviously must have won the First Chechen War. They obviously should have beaten the Japanese when they fought the war with the Japanese. The war with Finland should have gone a lot differently than it went. There's a lot of different historical moments that Russia experienced that should have gone differently if the calculation was as simple as, look at the spreadsheet, there's more Russians than this group of people. And you could do this not only for Russia, you could do this with any other number of wars. Afghanistan, Vietnam, painful memories that us Americans at home know of. But I think it's easier for people to accept doing nothing if they tell themselves that the victory of an occupying force that wants to annihilate an identity of people, it makes it a lot easier to swallow, right? And I'm not even saying that they're doing it disingenuously. I just think that it's genuinely something to help the medicine go down. We also got no practical option today for security guarantees outside of proposals from those who support Ukraine to reinforce Ukraine and get them more supplies so that the Russians have no choice but to accept an arrangement where they can't invade Ukraine again. And I appreciate Lactoid's honesty. I have to give him credit that he said, look, I guess the arrangement we'd be making would not necessarily stop Russia from invading again, and they might well be able to just do that again. There would be nothing to stop them. And honestly, while we talk about we would want Trump to be hard, if they did, how confident is anyone in here that Trump would actually hold the Russians to their word? That Trump would go in there and start bombing shit, that he'd reimpose all the sanctions, even though we know that Trump is very personality-based. We know he cares a lot about personal relationships, and I think his personal relationship with Putin matters a lot to him too, and I just find it hard to see him going back and trying to enforce anything, and I think that's why he doesn't commit to security guarantees, because I think he doesn't give a fuck. Outside of that, I think the last thing I have to say is just, support Ukraine, don't support Russia, and for the love of God, please stop listening to the Russians when it comes to how they're winning or not winning. Please look at open source intel, look at Russian sources if you must to, but cross-reference them with Ukrainian sources to get an idea of how the casualties are going and how much supplies the Russians have, because I'm telling you, Russia's not in a better position than the United States militarily right now.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, Dylan. Links to his stuff is in my YouTube description. Really appreciate you. I'll get to the super chats after I let everyone leave, because I've kept them here too long. But Lactoid gets the last word. Go ahead, Lactoid.
Thank you. I am Lactoid. You can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. I actually do think that this was a productive conversation. I didn't go into this conversation expecting to change the minds of our opponents here in this debate, not only because it's normally the case that you don't change the minds of your opponents during a public debate, but also I'm not sure I would want to because of the relatively draconian laws in Ukraine against disagreeing with the government narrative. We all know what happened to Coach Red Pill. By negatively covering Ukraine, he was arrested and in prison, where he later died, and that has yet to be investigated. He died of pneumonia. Absolute tragedy. And again, for those of you in Ukraine, maybe you should just be sticking with the government narrative.
I had such loving sex with Zelensky, and I'm going to do it again in front of his wife. Now I'm going to go there in a month, and I'm not going to be arrested.
Are you initiating that I'm lying?
This is my closing. This is my closing, guys.
He's spewing lies, Wick. It's
this is my closing, Wick.
It is I get
it.
I'm sorry. I just couldn't help myself.
All good, Wick.
I'm a bastard.
I'll do this.
So Ukraine absolutely has media bans in terms of heavy restrictions that even the EU has criticized. They have language bans. They've banned Russian cultural product in Kiev.
Okay. I'm sorry, but Lactoid does get to give his closing. We can't interrupt him. I'm sorry. Lactoid, go ahead.
Yeah, they absolutely have. Again, you guys can just look this up. They absolutely have in Kiev, for example. There is a ban on Russian language cultural product. That was in 2023. You can go ahead and look it up yourself.
Look it up.
Mercado said feelings without facts. I cited a tremendous amount of facts, including specific articles from a different country's constitutions. And the only response to this, which we've seen a little bit during my closing, was nothing but constant interruptions. In a 3 versus 2, almost a 4 versus 2 at points. The interruptions were typical of this kind of conversation. None of them were actually interrupting to engage with the veracity or the truth of anything that I was saying. They were simply throwing in allegations of propaganda while dodging the actual questions of the truth value. I need people here to recognize the sleight of hand that's happening when they do this. They don't want you to engage in specific points. They don't want you to do your own research. They want you to listen to their anecdotal experience and their disinformation, and they want to dismiss any challenge with ad homs and non sequiturs. I was accused of lying and spreading propaganda, yet at no point on anything that I said was I disproven. The only real point came from Dylan, which was that what would prevent Ukraine from being invaded again, which apparently comes from putting them in NATO, and yet Russia apparently is strong enough to be planning to invade all of NATO. This apparent hypocrisy, I think, proves that they want their cake and they want to eat it too. What I would say is, whenever you have one side trying to shut down the other side with nothing but ad homs, non sequiturs, not trying to engage in the actual truth value of anything, that should be a red flag that perhaps they are not to be trusted. Do your own research. Even Wikipedia research on this would disprove a lot of the things that they're saying. Support peace and let's stop death together. Thank you.
Okay. Descriptions in the channel. Gang, again, if you enjoyed this content...
Русский язык не запрещен. Он не запрещен. I said that Russian is not prohibited and nothing of Russian culture is prohibited. Russian propaganda is prohibited. Sorry.
You should go outside sometime, Lactoid.
Yeah, you should go outside, yeah. Oh, by the way, come to Ukraine.
That would be nice. You can go with me. Lactoid, I'll go with you.
That just kind of is a threat after what you guys did to Coach Red Pill. I don't want to go to Ukraine. They're going to kill me.
No, don't worry. Don't worry.
Nobody's killing me. Oh my God.
They're going to kill me. They're going to kill me.
So you're like,
after this debate, like, I'll keep this going, right? Like, if you want.
After this debate, they're going to fucking kill me. I'm not going to go to Ukraine. Are you kidding me?
Just don't be Coach Red Pill and you'll be fine.
Oh, sure. That's easy.
I would go to Ukraine.
Don't smoke 46
what was he arrested for? Wait, what was he arrested for again?
Well, a few things. Number one,
spreading propaganda, was it?
Artillery positions.
That you didn't even let. Well, I thought you said I was interrupting.
Yeah, you were the whole fucking debate. What are you talking about?
Okay. You
guys did just yell over me. Fuck out of him. You didn't let him finish.
Yeah, lying should be interrupted. You shouldn't allow lies.
Well, if you guys going to be here, I'll just read the super chats because why not? Fuck it. $5 from Justice35 says, Wick, please donate my chat money to Anna and the troops. Well, I gave the link to everyone. I don't know.
By the way, I appreciate really the conversation that is happening at all, because people haven't been talking about us for a while since Gaza, and Israel and Palestine happened. So I do appreciate the conversation. The fact that I'm extremely dejected and kind of over the entire thing. You can probably understand why that, because I heard all of this like million times from Russians and from fucking Americans that repeat Russian shit all the time. And do your research, like Lactoid said, because it will show what we are saying, not whatever the fuck he's saying. And yeah, I really appreciate the Wick and especially Dylan and Andrew for sticking by us despite their government that isn't. And I can't wait to see you. Actually,
I will have
in
to at some
Ukraine.
point.
Yeah, sorry, that's
Wick, you can come with
me.
me. Wick, let's go on a convoy. Go.
Lactoid, because I think that we can have a conversation about this, just us. Maybe a moderator, right? But I think you're just demonstrably wrong on some of the points. But as a moderator, I couldn't really jump in.
Which point?
Okay, so first of all, the Euromaidan coup revolution, I think that Dylan was exactly right when you say you were misframing it. You're leaving out a lot of context and information that does change how these things go, right? Like the fact that they did break the Constitution, fair, what enough,
which article?
Why
which
did
article
they break the Constitution would be the question. And
which article did they break?
Article 108 or 1.108 or what the fuck?
Misa, my way. I
apologize. You're saying the
yes,
Euromaidan.
The Euromaidans did. But why is the question? Like, why did they do that? Did they just do it for funsies? Did they have a reason? And the question becomes, is there ever a reason to violate the Constitution? I think even you would agree under certain conditions that yes, it would be
under certain conditions. I understand it, but then again,
hold on, let me
the Constitution,
finish, right? Because you asked why you were wrong, and you got to let me finish. See,
that doesn't make you wrong.
Notice the people who are trying to interrupt, right? To try to interrupt as they're saying. Notice how they don't want to engage, right? Now, notice how, and whenever I'm
Are you moving on to a second point?
They're trying to interrupt.
Are you moving on to a second point?
While I'm making my point, because they don't want you to.
Is it a separate point?
They don't want you to hear it, okay? They don't want you to hear it. Because if they
don't pretend
you'd be
like the whole fucking debate that just happened
wrong.
didn't just
And
happen.
you understand why
ridiculous.
He's interrupting me right now.
You are the moderator of the debate. What are you talking about?
Because the debate's over. I closed it. We had the closings. Now you guys are just fucking here in my house, and I'm trying to read super chats, and you're interrupting me. You can stay. You're all cool, but here we are. But I forgot because you fucking interrupted me, and I lost my train of thought. So let's keep going with the super chats. 10 pounds from Rizius. Is it true that many of the cost that is given to Ukraine is from form of out-of-date arms? Can there be a case made that giving arms to Ukraine is a good method of disposing U.S. military junk? Yes.
I mean, there's been some discussion about this. For example, Australia was going to decommission like 31 Abrams tanks, and the Ukrainians were like, "Dog, what? You're just going to destroy them? Give it to us." And they're like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." And there's been a lot of examples like this, where it would actually be technically more expensive for the government to destroy the gear than it would be to ship it over. And in instances like that, when you don't send over aid, I think it has to either be out of spite or fear. But I mean, like, there's not enough of that to just support Ukraine. They have to have, because eventually you're going to run out of old gear. You can't just continue to have this, like, hand-me-down program like they're their little brother and they're growing into your clothing. But it has been one of the main ways that gear has been sent over. Most of the gear that I've seen, like American gear, is stuff that my grandpa would have used in Vietnam. It's very it's kind of mind-boggling.
Like also, there's a lot of benefit. If I may, there's a lot of benefit to giving arms, even modern arms, to Ukrainians so that we can see them in action and based on their performance in actual hostile environments under certain conditions, we get that intel back and we're able to iterate and make our weapons better, stronger, and better use our tactics and our doctrine in order to how to use what we have in a more efficient manner.
Just offloading old shit and then subsidizing weapons manufacturers. I mean, isn't that really, like from everything I understand, weapons
military
manufacturers
industrial complex
having, record-setting profits because of this conflict. And at the same time, they're having a very difficult time arming the Ukrainians, which is what they're
Smoker, I got a question. I got a good faith question for you. I got a good faith question for Smoker. Okay, so the taxpayers paid for all those weapon systems that are old now. They're outdated, right? And Ukraine's getting those. What do you think would be a better use? Good faith. I'm not trying to get you anything. Just honestly, like other than giving it to a country that really needs them, right? Like an old Humvee, which we're now using JLTVs, for example. Older systems, right, that are now outdated. What would you rather do with taxpayer-paid weapon systems that already exist?
I don't, to be honest with you, I mean, I would imagine that there's some potential for them to either be repurposed or possibly the materials could be used for other things, refurbishing weapons that we need for other conflicts throughout the world. It's not like we're not involved in other conflicts, by the way. Those weapons could have potentially lots of uses, but it's not that I'm against giving Ukrainians old stuff. It's just this kind of sleight of hand where I feel like we're saying, well, we have to arm the Ukrainians because democracy and all this stuff. And then it's like there are for-profit companies in America raking in shitloads of taxpayer money, benefiting from this conflict. And then in practice, they offload their old shit to Ukraine and manufacture new stuff. And you have people like Mitch McConnell saying like, well, we're expanding our industrial base, which is somewhat true, even though like a very small percentage of Americans actually work in the weapons manufacturing industry. So it's very little benefit to us, and there's people making lots of money on it. In fact, there was a report in CNN which argues that the for-profit military industry is part of the reason why we're not able to produce as much as Russia or the same pace as they are.
That's true, by the way. I agree with that.
Mhm.
This
I
would
would
be
have
one
to
of the
agree
few
as well.
areas. This is one of the few areas I think I'm gonna find like 80% agreement with Nonsmoker here, which is a blessing. I guess the clouds have parted. I do think the way that it worked was we would fight guys in caves, right? And usually to fight a guy, and I'm just trying to be blunt. I don't want to fight guys in caves, and so we'd use a lot of high precision rockets. But you don't need a huge supply of those because you don't need to throw 10, 20, 30 of those. You throw one big one at that target. And so these companies have been producing like 1,000 to 2,000 rockets or something a year to basically be like have maybe half of them used, then half of them put into storage. And then all of a sudden you need 12,000, right? And so the reason they weren't producing 12,000 is these companies did not want to have a bunch of stock that they were going to have to destroy and not have to sell, and then they would not have a profit. And so they were concentrating on making extremely high-tech precision weapons that were mostly used for the war on terror in small supplies but at high price tags.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is how we had very advanced technology in the United States. As much shit as the F-35 gets, the F-35 is an extremely advanced aircraft. It just costs a lot more than maybe it should have. But what that means is when you're facing an army that has 20,000 artillery shells compared to your 1,000 production, then you have a problem. And so it is true that I think that by the nature of the consolidation of all the defense companies that we used to have during the Cold War into like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, on top of this war on terror military production model to make profit, has made it that we were not ready for a large scale peer-to-peer war in Europe. That's the largest war in Europe since World War II. We were not ready for that. But then somebody would make the argument, even more reason to make these investments now and try to change the structures of our system, so we could quickly produce artillery shells, etc. Which is one of the counters. But the one thing I want to throw out there is I agree that this is true, but I also want to throw out there that a lot of this investment was towards expanding production, so then we can send more aid to Ukraine. So when we're talking about these numbers, the numbers Trump throw out there, 350 billion, is bullshit, right? We're talking about military aid that actually made its way to Ukraine. We're talking about 170 billion. Well, actually not 170 billion. We're talking maybe, if we're lucky, 100 billion, because 70 billion of that was spent on replenishing, like you were saying, American stockpiles, and a certain percentage of that was also spent on expanding. But if those go into American stocks, and then at expansion of ammunition goes, and then we don't send it to Ukraine, then it wasn't a gift to Ukraine. It was just a gift to the United States and defense contractors. I agree with you.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, there is no God but God, and Lockheed Martin is his messenger, okay? So here we go. The military-industrial complex is good. We need more of it. We need to spend more money on it, okay? I am a big believer in Pax Americana and being the world police. But that's another debate. $10 from Zetsway, your friend, Lactoid. Ukraine didn't use impeachment to remove Yanukovych. They voted on the grounds that he had withdrawn from fulfilling his constitutional duties, and there is no 2/3 requirement for that. I'm going to get through these, right? And then you can respond to...
Violates Article 108.
Yeah. £5 from Razius. There has been talks that the Russian economy is only alive due to the war, so why would Putin want peace? Can't this fact be used as a bargaining chip?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, it wasn't it was a £5 super chat. Okay.
Okay.
$10 for Zach. Russia has conscripted for this war as well. Convenient how Lactoid suddenly has this humanitarian pang of conscience when it's something
Literally
that he
talking
can
about the Russians
use
too.
to bash Ukraine. What a coincidence. $5 from Nomfon. Wow, Lactoid justifies slavery, just like an evil utilitarian. $20 from Alexander Wynn. Lactoid, have you considered that not everyone who is drafted is unwilling to fight if called in, but for other reasons are unwilling to volunteer? And, well, if Anna's not here.
If they're not willing to volunteer, the fuck does that mean? You're not willing to volunteer to fight?
I wouldn't volunteer, but if someone came up to me and says, "We need you," I'd go. I can understand.
Yeah,
the reasoning.
there are
because there's a penalty associated.
You wouldn't have
No,
the
no,
penalty
no, it's like,
associated.
well, that's not.
that's
There's
not
also
it.
this sense of like.
This is the
I will
dumbest
go-
point I've
well,
ever heard in my life.
wait,
This
okay,
can't be a real
Lactoid.
point.
Hold on,
Giving
no.
Lactoid,
If I
that's
see,
pretty-
I'll give you an
I'm
example.
sorry,
I'll give you an
I-
example. I'll
whatever.
give you an example. I'll give you an example that's a little weird, but maybe it'll help get the point. Lactoid, if I saw you struggling to lift something, okay? I'm struggling to lift something like I knew you were moving, right? And you were lifting stuff, and I saw you, and I was like, oh, I really don't want to help him. But then you asked me to help, I'd be like, okay, I'll help you.
Yeah, that's called recruitment. So if somebody's going
Lactoid.
around recruiting people, that's fine. But
Lactoid.
conscription is when you force them when they don't want to go.
You're the one with the American flag behind you, dude. Like it's like you're projecting this, but then you wouldn't actually like
Okay.
do any of it, or like what it's called. About.
Yeah,
What
take
you're
that
you-
flag
I-
down,
I
bro.
will-
You don't want to
okay,
kill for it.
I'm sorry. Like I have conversations with people.
talking
It is
about. You
true.
have to
Wait,
sometimes.
There's like some people, and I think they're coping to me when they say, "Well, if they call upon me, then I'll go," because they're saying like, "Yeah, well, I'm patriot." But there's other people I talk to, and I can see it in their eyes when they say like, "Look, I got 3 kids. I got to be there for them. But if they call upon me, I think it's my duty to protect my country, and I will go." And I know that might sound silly to you, but there are people that I've talked to that do believe that, and they think that basically they're in line. There's a lottery system, and they hope they don't get picked. But if they do, well, it's not unfair. It would be unfair for me to force that on some other father. Now that I have been called up, it's my responsibility. There are people that have that mentality. That's, you can call it silly, but
And I'll be
It's
honest
real.
too. I'll admit my bias because I served in the military and I have that inner experience. I've been out of the military for a long time now, but I'll admit my bias to it, and I feel that it is a responsibility if you're called upon, or if the government comes to you like, hey, we need you to defend our country. Like you got to, especially as a man, in my opinion.
So
that you
wait,
should
was
respond and do
Vietnam,
this.
was the draft for Vietnam justified in your view?
No, bad. We shouldn't have. We should have done.
So
we should have
there
done
are instances where it's not like you might be called upon to
comparing-
But it
serve
was
for
during
us,
World
but-
War II.
So it's a fake. It's a fake. The comparison to Vietnam's not the same. Where we
No,
said
no,
that
I'm
was
not saying it's
American.
I'm not saying it's the same as Ukraine. I get Ukraine's need.
Both
to
relied on domino
conscript
theory, though, by
soldiers,
the way.
but I'm curious. Just in your view, are there instances where conscription drafts are wrong?
Yeah, like Vietnam, America.
I got you.
But
Okay.
there are
Can
instances
I ask
where
you
it's
one
correct,
other
Well,
question?
Russia,
such
yeah,
as-
Russia's
Yeah,
conscription.
there is an
I'm
instance
sorry.
where it's.
I
Yep.
apologize. I left because ballistic strikes. So
we do have a super
yeah.
chat for you, though. If you're here
We
for
do.
a minute,
Oh,
how popular
thank
is
you. Yeah.
Zelensky?
I haven't been blown up.
Yeah, this is to you. How popular is Zelensky at this point in Ukraine?
Well, he was still relatively popular, like 50-something%. I'd say most people are either pro Zaluzhny as a potential candidate when elections, can potentially happen, or they are Zelensky. They are two like most popular candidates in Ukraine right now. But after the shit fest, though, in the Oval Office, his approvals fucking skyrocketed. I talked with almost all of my prolific Zelensky haters out there, and they're all are standing him now and supporting him because he didn't, quote unquote, sell us out. So if Trump did anything, I'd say he boosted Zelensky's approval pretty high. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's up to interpretation, I suppose. But the fact of the matter is that his approval is very much has been increased by recent events.
And this is aside, but this is something that I just heard today, right? And you maybe can confirm, maybe not, maybe you don't know. But one of the things that I heard today was that Trump had been sending people to approach dissidents or other parties in Ukraine. Has that been something
Actual
you've
coup,
seen?
by the way.
Is that something you've
Yes.
seen?
Yeah.
Apparently, they have been approaching. They really try to get rid of him, obviously, because he's not playing the ball. He's not submitting to their demands. So they're tried apparently to approach Tymoshenko and Poroshenko. Poroshenko used to be a president of Ukraine, but Tymoshenko was the one who lost to Yanukovych during the elections when Yanukovych was elected. So basically, Trump kind of like approached the least popular people alive in Ukraine, which I made a joke on Twitter like that they're not digging the rare earth in minerals, but they're digging the corpses of basically dead politicians in Ukraine, because Tymoshenko is like one of the least popular people alive. And even for Tymoshenko and Poroshenko, despite being opponents of Zelensky, said that they do not support elections right now because it's not against our constitution, basically, and you have to lift martial law to have elections right now. So I don't know how successful that will be, but maybe they will dig up Yanukovych or some shit. I don't know at this point.
That is something. It is something I saw reported, and I'm just wondering if you can confirm that. And fair enough.
Yeah, that seems to be true. Seems to be at least.
Super chat, $5. Nonsmoker. When you look at the invaded and say they're bad for defending themselves, you are in fact pro-Russian. Praying for the
I didn't fucking say that.
Shut up with that Russian propaganda.
But I never said that. I never said they were bad for defending themselves. In fact, I explicitly said they have the right to defend themselves multiple fucking times.
Just reading the $5 super chat, buddy. Okay.
When he says that, that's Russian propaganda.
Okay. Anything else before I just have to go?
You are the Russian propaganda, not him.
Yeah.
You're the Russian
more than
propaganda.
Nonsmoker.
You guys are
like
the Russian
Nonsmoker
propaganda.
at least wants to talk.
The Russians are in the room right now.
Yeah.
Lactoid would capitulate to an invader.
Through you, but not through him.
Okay.
Nonsmoker, you got more points out of this one.
This has
Ricardo,
been
have you said anything
lovely.
smart ever? Just out of curiosity.
Every day at 3
You
o'clock
sure about that?
Eastern time.
Are you sure
Mercado
about
media.
that? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you guys are having fun. I'm glad
I'm
you
off
guys
on
love the
Sundays.
talk.
No,
Go follow all these people. I love them. Next week we're gonna have a debate on probably conscription at this point, right? And we're also going to debate on the Department of Education. And I'm going to be debating someone on Rumble apparently at 11:30 at night on Ukraine. He said that if I loved Ukraine so much, I should go fight for it. And I think that's the silliest argument.
That's
ever.
a classic. That's a classic.
We're going to talk about it.
What's Rumble though?
It's
like
another
a platform
streaming service. It's
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just a Ukrainian,
It's all good. It's all good. So that should be a fun discussion. I'm going to ask him why he supports Putin over the Constitution, and it'll be that kind of show. But okay, we're going to rate out. Who are we rating it to?
Well,
Dylan, are you still streaming after this?
I'm probably gonna end after this.
Oh, okay.
This went a little longer than I expected.
Longer than I expected to. Okay. Well, I
It
guess
is 4 in
Lactoid,
the
are you gonna
morning,
still stream
I'd
after this?
say. Yeah.
I mean, if you want to, you can send me your viewers, and then I can send them to somebody of my
Okay,
choice.
so you're
if
not.
you'd like to.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm giving you options.
We'll just go into Nina then, and I'll see you guys. I'm not streaming tomorrow. I'll see you guys Monday. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Back to
See
being
ya.
home. And bye.
Bye. Wait, bye, all of you. Okay, it's got like 5
Bye.
seconds left before it pops off.